When you make a YouTube channel that does video game analysis, eventually a man in a suit will knock on your door and ask you, "Have you played Dark Souls?" Now, your answer is important. If you respond no, you run the risk of exile from the pretentious Video Game Analysis Association. Trust me, it happened to me. He said, "I have to make a video about these games before I retire." Well, I'm here. David OZ is back, and I'm trying something new. I've found something really, really powerful in just playing this game almost in a more cinematic style. I mean, honestly, I can't recommend it enough. Start roleplay walking everywhere you go. Start examining every detail. Act like you are the main character in a story. It's frankly made video games more fun for me recently. It's immersed me in a way that it wasn't before. I feel like a director. I'll plan out shots. I'll take notes on the lore and my character. And look, it is nerdy, but if I had to guess, you all watching this video consume video games at just a tremendous rate. You're checking off checklists, you're completing achievements, you're putting hundreds and hundreds of hours into video games. And this video, and what I hope you can take from it as well, is really just the video form of stopping to smell the roses. I hope that this video can act as a sort of Demon Souls movie, something for you to put on and listen and remember to go through Boletaria again, or maybe even for the first time. Because Demon Souls, at first, encourages this idyllic, almost cliche perspective of a knight cutting through ambiguous hordes of evildoers, what with its dragons and castles in the beginning of the game. Its slower pace emboldens sword and board knight characters to kind of fully roleplay in the armor of childhood stories. The cool thing is, though, all of the fantasy elements in this game kind of are underpinned by this truly deeply disturbing and subversive storytelling. It contrasts really well the stereotypical parts of Demon Souls. As you can see, we're using the PS5 remake for this. Look, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I understand that some people say the remake doesn't capture the identity of the original game. However, just look at it. Look at that dragon. I mean, it's unbelievable how good this game looks. And if I can be completely real, if I'm going to replay Demon Souls, which at this point I do twice a year, I'm loading up the PS5 remake. And I think that's probably the case for most people going forward. So, remake it is. Get over it. Our story starts with Latria, a woman of royalty who has learned magic, the art of spellcasting, but has also learned to be adept with a sword and shield. You know, the royalty class in this game really is, in a lot of ways, the best class. Magic is, frankly, broken in Demon Souls, but you're going to see it throughout this playthrough that I don't really end up using the magic that much, and when I do, it almost always results in me getting killed. Latria was called to the land of Boletaria for power and Demon Souls, but in my mind, she always came there for a thirst for knowledge.
King Alant the Twelfth, by channeling the power of souls, brought unprecedented prosperity to his northern kingdom of Boletaria. That is, until the colorless deep fog swept across the land.
The lore and storytelling of Demon Souls is so interesting in how, at least on the surface, it seems so similar to Dark Souls. When I examine it closely, though, I find a uniquely political message underneath the traditional From Software aesthetic. See, where Dark Souls is expansive in its storytelling and lore, I do believe it is telling a relatively simple thematic story. It's about entropy and existence. Demon Souls, on the other hand, is much more concerned with human beings and their relationship to knowledge, God, religion, currency, and crucially power. In that sense, it is a far more Lovecraftian story than anything I knew that they had made before Bloodborne. Demon Souls wants to examine the way that power and currency filters up through the blood, sweat, and bodies of a subjugated group of people. Demon Souls wants to be critical of the ways in which souls, which every living being is entitled to in the originally dreamed cosmology of this universe, by the way, how those souls get siphoned and hoarded by powers outside an individual's comprehension or control. Take the Old One, for example, an eldritch being said to have the power to consume all souls. It's what I would consider the primary mystery of Demon Souls' introduction. What is the purpose of this being? If a colorless fog spread across Boletaria like the cinematic would suggest, creating demons and harvesting souls, where was God during this time? Why would capital H He allow a creation of his own to sap the very own creation he made, being souls? Lucky for us, though, a hero named Valorfax broke a fissure in the fog, a fissure in which our hero navigates through.
And steady extinction. The deep fog will eventually swallow all lands near and far. But Boletaria has one final hope. A lone warrior who has braved the baneful fog. Has the land found its savior? Or have the demons found a new slave?
One of the crowning achievements of Demon Souls is how it morally presents its entire plot. All you know is that you are here from a land away, that you here are either supposed to be a hero or, as said by the game, a slave to the demons.
So that you may lull the Old One back to slumber.
I mean, realistically, what does that mean to a new player? Lull the Old One back to its slumber. The game pulls on you in so many different directions. It establishes traditional fantasy tropes, but then it brings out entirely new ideas and concepts. And it's why I think so many people struggle to latch onto the stories of these games. I mean, they're so strictly open in their role-playing. And what I mean by that is, so many of these games, you end up being an outsider. You come from a distant land, and all of these people are pulling you in different directions, trying to get you to do stuff that you don't even understand. The contract in Bloodborne, being a tarnished in Elden Ring. Every time you are asked to do something in one of these games, the story is malleable enough to support a lot of different motivations. Alethea's motivation, as we've established, is knowledge. One of the most important pieces of world building in this story is that souls grant clarity. That to have a soul and be powerful in the soul arts is to be more or less aware of feelings like love and hate and having dreams and motivations. A soul-starved person is not just a zombie, right? They're aspirationless, motivationless, feelingless. And I think Alethea, in her old age, was kind of having some existential dread. She grew up royalty. She was privileged, right? She had all of this opportunity. But what she wanted was clarity. And when she heard that there were demon souls, powerful souls that can grant us immense amounts of clarity, she knew she had to travel outside of her bubble. And that's just in my head, right? You could imagine anybody traveling to Boletaria for immense power. Maybe a warrior wants to go for strength beyond measure. Maybe like souls act as currency, right? Maybe someone wants to come to be rich beyond their imagination. The plot structure of Demon Souls allows for like an intrinsic role-playing. A role-playing that isn't in a menu.
I've always kind of admired how these games generally skirt binary understandings of morality, and instead of systemizing these ideas like in normal RPGs, Demon Souls and its predecessors tend to give the player the agency to decide the morality. It puts the trust in the player rather than the UI. This video isn't just about my character or just about thematics. Let's talk about this tutorial a little bit. As far as tutorials go, it's not breaking any new ground. I think what it does do well, though, is two things. It establishes an atmosphere, and it uses its enemies to teach you fundamental parts of Demon Souls combat. Up here's actually a good opportunity. I'm just going to keep yapping here. This guy approaches you, and it tells you beforehand to use a strong attack. Now, David OZ and his infinite wisdom doesn't seem like he did that, but I think the expectation here is that you see an armored person approaching you, and using a strong attack will then stagger the enemy, leaving you open for another hit. So much of that seems obvious to us now in 2025, right? However, this might not have been the case when this game first came out. The idea that maybe the best way to open up an attack is with an attack, right, might kind of chip away at some of the scared defensive playstyle that you see. What am I doing here? Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, I remember this. Oh, it didn't really work out, but man, did I want a cool panning shot of me stabbing someone in the neck. I'll take it. One of the reasons why I do think this tutorial works in this sort of utilitarian way, but not really in an interesting way, is how it uses its level geometry to force you to do things. With this Blue-Eye Knight enemy here, you don't have a lot of room to move left to right. In a sense, you only have a way to go through him. Whereas before, in that more open area, before the Archstone, it gave you a lot more room to take advantage of weaknesses in enemies' attacks. And I'm sure we will talk ad nauseum about healing and healing systems in these games, but I think now is an important time to note just how simple the item descriptions are in this game. I mean, even something like the Noble's Lotus, for those of you that are really tuned into Demon Souls, you'll know that just the description here in its simplicity tells a really interesting story, especially once you start to go through Latria. We will talk in more detail later on, but the fact that this item that is used to counteract poison is known most popularly amongst nobility is storytelling. See, our character starts with a silver catalyst and a silver coronet. This establishes the idea that at the start of the story, we're already well graduated from the school of Jormungandr, a place that we'll hear a little bit more about in the Tower of Latria, but crucially, we would have received a great education in the soul arts from Sage Freak. Our clothes are described as being worn by sanctioned magicians, something that tells us about Aletheia, but also tells us about the world, that the harnessing of the soul arts is almost institutional at times in the history of Boletaria. You can imagine then how a disparity of soul power could easily happen in Boletaria, right? Those with an access to education, those with an access to the School of Jormungandr, those with an access to silver items, which oftentimes boost MP or increase the amount of souls you get. All of this says something about Boletaria. You get to get more souls if you have more souls. I know it sounds simple, but it applies even to the demons. The Vanguard demon stands sentinel as one of the more truly frightening boss introductions I can remember. I mean, it's no Capra demon. Let's not get carried away here. But this amalgamation of both prisoner and warrior, but also animal upon animal. I mean, we have this sort of thick gray leather skin matched with these horns, a sort of tail that barely juts out, but above that is these carbuncular wings. the remake Vanguard Demon to me is truly an accomplishment. And I know that there's actually a great deal of controversy about this and its jiggle physics. But I think what it captures is this sort of melting pot of parts and ideas and chaos that really becomes a core part of the From Software enemy design. What I can gather from this enemy is just a sense of time. What was once an instrumental part of an advancing force is now chained and placed into this outskirts of Boletaria to defend against what? And in that sense, the Vanguard Demon kind of matches the Asylum Demon. It matches a lot of early game From Software bosses and how it's almost tragic in a sense and sets an immediate tone for just how long things have been happening to the world that you are walking into. So before I made this video, it's funny, I'd actually played through every single game in hopes to do a video ranking and reviewing every single From Software boss. I wrote even the first part of a script, and while that video may kind of see the light of day in some way, shape, or form, I want to sort of fold that into this series as well. So going forward, I will be providing my detailed opinion on each of these bosses through the form of a rubric. Yes, Mr. David OZ, class is back in session. On screen now, you can see this rubric that I have developed to kind of be able to better quantify and put into words how I feel about these bosses so that I can begin ranking them on a numerical level. As you can see, I've split my criteria into weighted categories, with mechanics being the most important, in my opinion, to the quality of a boss, with the presentation of the boss coming quickly behind at 20 points out of 50. And then finally, a little cherry on top, where that lore, that extra 5 points, can sort of make or break a boss's ranking, sort of like it does for me, right? I would never consider a boss incredible on lore by itself. However, oftentimes, knowing that little extra story or that importance can bring a boss to a higher level. Obviously, I will provide more detail in my spoken analysis, but the rubric helps kind of demonstrate on a numerical level where these bosses rank and for what reason. As we go through these games, I will rank them alongside other bosses. That being said, the way I'm choosing to do this is by placing them in as we get to them. Meaning, as of right now, at this point in the video, Vanguard Demon is the #1 boss in From Software history. No, in all seriousness, though, this boss suffers from a lot of the same problems that a lot of From Software introductory bosses do, which is simplicity. You can be taken out by 1 or 2 hits from this boss, but the problem is he only has 2 or 3 attacks. So once you kind of nail those down, as you can see me doing, it isn't much of an issue, is it? It's why Vanguard Demon is going to get a 7 in the mechanics section, a 12 in the presentation section, for just how daunting and powerful he looks the second you walk through that fog wall. And ultimately, the Vanguard Demon will receive no points from the lore section. 19 out of 50. Let's move on. Defeating the Vanguard Demon, which is not necessarily expected of players, will unlock the path to the unknown egress. This is one of my single favorite locations in the entirety of the Demon's Souls remake. If anything, just for the way that the dragon's breath actually moves the flame. It's really kind of fascinating. I think you can see that I notice it here and just have to take a second to admire it. The dragon god acts as such an amazing sort of just image for this game.
Well, and it's a good thing he's paired with such an amazing boss fight. Am I right? After doing some looting here, which will help early game players, the Dragon God punches you to death. Yes, you heard that right. So hard that actually you go skidding across the pavement in a way that, if you have a helmet on, creates sparks instead of that blood effect, which I think is a neat touch. But your death is couched with this text that says, "However the Nexus traps you, you shall remain in this world forever as a soul." There's a lot to unpack with the Nexus, the way that it impacts your being and your existence, and just what happens to someone when they die in this world.
Soul of the lost, withdrawn from its vessel. Let strength be granted so the world might be mended. So the world might be mended. This is the Nexus. It holds together the northern land of Boletaria. Thou canst not quit the Nexus, but the 5 archstones will guide thee to the outer lands.
The Nexus is one of the better hub worlds in these games, if not entirely because of Stockpile Thomas. In all seriousness, though, its function in the story of Demon Souls is interesting because it's said to trap you, or that we are imprisoned in the Nexus. If you talk to the members of the Nexus, no one seems thrilled to be there, but somehow simultaneously no one is exactly itching to go back out and find their bodies. The Nexus functions as a safe place for the player to stock up and refocus themselves. I think sometimes we forget just how hostile these games were and can be to folks. The Nexus, I think, was designed with a certain tonal consideration in mind as well. The Maiden in Black's voice soothes the environment, gives you an opportunity to explore and look around without danger of enemies. And with a few exceptions, the Nexus's inhabitants treat you with respect and kindness. I understand that the Nexus's location can be pieced together through description and even cut archstone content. However, I do feel like it's important that the Nexus sort of feels like it exists outside of the understood world. The fact that the Nexus imprisons your soul, that it provides a gameplay consideration, but also enough mystery to make the player wonder, I think is enough to make this one of the better hub worlds. We will talk quite a bit more about the Nexus's place in the lore and story of Demon Souls. However, it's time that we head to Boletaria once more for level 1-1, the Gates of Boletaria. I love how just daunting the start of this area is, and how so much of it really represents the beginning of a journey. You know, you'll see a lot of signs on the ground that says things like, "The real Demon Souls starts here." And I don't know, I guess I get why that has become such a meme in this community. When you are placed here after seeing that dragon swoop down and you see these monstrous walls in front of you, there is a real feeling of, okay, time to roll my shoulders back, lean forward, and start this thing. The fervor in which these first enemies attack you is not totally unjustified. They are soul-starved, former slaves of the Boletarian Empire and starving for clarity. When you consider these enemies as being hungry, it often... it makes me sad. And it should make you sad too, because anyone who played this game as their first Souls game knows that you probably killed these stair-standing soul-starved more times than you can possibly count. You did that because you have to learn somewhere, right? And learning the art of Souls games, or the Souls arts, can be quite the adjustment. I think maybe what makes the deliberate and tactics-based action of these games so addictive is the fact that stamina is an ever-changing, it's up and down, it's a resource that you must constantly consider in each conflict. In my opinion, stamina is the foundation to why these Souls games work. Your inability to swing indefinitely lends credence to the importance of every swing, right? Oftentimes you hear gritty shooter games like BioShock or Resident Evil being described with this reverence toward the scarcity of ammo. You'll hear phrases like, every bullet counts, so every shot means more, or something. In a Souls game, this is basically just as relevant, right? Your ammunition is your stamina. Your survival is normally tied closer to the green bar than it is the red one. Throughout the beginning of your first playthrough, a full bar of stamina can get you only a number of swings, 3, 4, maybe 5, but with your 5th leaving you with no stamina to escape the enemy's follow-up. One should treat their stamina in the same way you treat those select few 9mm rounds in other games. Without them, you die. But it comes back immediately, right? Your stamina. How can I compare a resource that is regained within seconds to ammunition that is given back sparingly? Well, I feel good about comparing the both because of the permanency and the effectiveness of the attacks in these games. Getting hit hurts. It hurts bad. It hurts you, but it also hurts your enemies bad. These enemies, these soul-starved in World 1-1 of Boletaria, can catch you in an arm-flailing attack combo that can end your life instantly. Because of strictly how much damage an attack or a series of attacks does to you, the window of survival and reaction is so short that it might as well be instant. So, in turn, because of the instantaneousness of pain in these games, the stamina regen might as well take as long as the equivalent ammunition regeneration in other games. If you don't got it in that moment, it doesn't matter that it will come back in a couple of seconds. Dark Souls exists in this weird, paradoxical gameplay state where your actions are both incredibly slow and deliberate, yet you and your enemies' death being at times instant. The deliberateness of combat is important to the series, obviously. However, it isn't important just because animations take a long time and cannot be canceled. That's why I don't necessarily think that slow animations or deliberate combat or whatever else you want to call it, right, is necessarily a defining element to the Souls-like genre. There are so many games that try and model what these From Software games do, and oftentimes what they take from them is, well, your character has to swing their sword slowly, or they have to move slowly or roll slowly. And of course, that slow movement is only important because of the stamina bar and the way that it impacts so much of the gameplay and the high damage elements of this game. Your stamina management is simple, yes, but that single layer of additional complexity changes this combat from any other game attempting a slow and plodding combat system. On its own, Souls combat is as close to a turn-based combat system as a real-time combat system can get. When you queue up an attack, that attack is happening whether you regret it or not. And it's especially the case in these earlier FromSoft games like Demon's Souls. In that sense, the game becomes more about tactics and pattern recognition rather than pure reaction speed, which people have talked about quite a bit. If you've played a lot of character action games, you know just how inconsistent, in terms of the level of quality, of course, these games can actually be. But I believe one of the reasons why From Software has been able to find such excellent addictive consistency in their titles is because of how deeply their game revolves around the stamina, around it as a resource that is meant to be considered constantly. It brings order to what could be an otherwise incredibly sluggish and frustrating combat experience. That order provides consistency, and it provides control. If you've ever watched someone play one of these games for the first time, or maybe that's you, then you'll see just how often they sort of spam out their R1 button.
it's funny. If you've played a lot of these games and you've watched a lot of YouTube videos about them, watch back your own gameplay, or, watch some of mine, I guess, and notice just how many small things you do in the sake, or I should say, like, in the name of stamina management. How many small things that you do that you don't even think about. The breaks between your attacks, like putting down your shield when you're not in threat of being attacked so that it regens faster. There's so many small skill expressions that happen all because of stamina management, and it's not like a combo or something that you would learn in Devil May Cry. This is something that happens entirely through game feel. This is to say that this education of stamina management happens almost entirely subconsciously, or it's implicit just in the way that the game controls and feels. And when I really try to parse out why I think these games are just built different compared to similar games, I feel like the stamina bar and its management is one of the best examples I can give to just how much of a sixth sense From Software seems to have in terms of combat design. I really love World 1-1. I especially love this section right here. I love the enemy placement. To me, it just seems so textbook, so good with the ranged enemies and then the ambushes. I really love how there's this hole in the ground that kind of beckons you, but on closer inspection later in the game, you realize it's full of floating souls coming up from executed slaves in Boletaria. The level does a really good job of setting up a tone for what the outskirts of Boletaria is really like for its inhabitants. I mean, remember, these soul-starved are members of the Boletarian military. They're being forced to be the front line of defense. And for what? So when we see them kind of consumed by the demons' hunger, you have to ask yourself, how far away from themselves are they compared to, where they were before the scourge, before the demons took their souls? It sets a real tone, and I think the tone kind of helps bring meaning to the approach that you have to get through this level. This ends up being one of the larger levels in the game, and in a lot of ways it might be one of the tougher ones, depending on if you're new or not. It's so well designed, though, and so deliberate. The level allows you to systematically go through it, enemy by enemy, learning their placements and understanding which doors to go through and which corners to look behind. It teaches the player a very, very specific FromSoft skill, which is patience. I can't imagine how many times I had to play this level the first time I played this game. I mean, I don't even want to think about it. I thought this game was, well, frankly, I thought it was crap. Trying to keep this one family friendly. I couldn't believe that this was how the game was meant to function. You're telling me when I die at the end, I have to kill everybody again? It is a lesson taught to you through pain. Because you may be sitting there and going, well, it's not even that difficult. It's one of the easier levels in the game. And in a lot of ways, I agree with you. I find it surprising if I die on this level, except for the red-eyed knight. We'll get to that in a second. However, that's certainly not the case when you first play it. This area is a great example. The scaffolding puts enemies behind you. It puts enemies above you. It puts enemies behind and above you. And you can't be expected to know where every single enemy is the first time you do it. However, the mastery that you get when you learn this level and you use the tools available to you, when you remember the ball that rolls down the stairs and opens up the item, when you remember that you can hit the wooden planks to roll down the iron balls to take out all of those extra enemies, it gives you so many little opportunities, little rewards for your careful attention. And that's not even paying attention to the fact that you just get better at the game by playing through these enemies.
Careful exploration will lead you to some chains that can be cut down, revealing a jade hair ornament. This ornament appears to have no meaning at the time. However, if you bring it back to Stockpile Thomas, it reveals a little something about his character and some of the fates of Boletarian families. Again, this level is setting a tone. I like to think that Alethea and her quest for knowledge, if you remember, is feeling somewhat conflicted in this moment. Sure, she is here for knowledge, she is here for the clarity in which soul arts can bring, but now she's feeling a little bit more exposed to the realities of the world in which she lives in. She was royalty after all. She had everything she needed, but now she gets to see what people outside of the walls, what their lives are like. Here we'll find the Cling Ring. Many of you know this ring as one of the best items in the gang. When you die in Demon Souls, you incur a halving of your health. But yeah, I always kind of wondered, why did this character in particular get red hair like that? You know, there's a similar situation in Elden Ring with, well, I won't get into that one, but where the hair of the body really matters, the color, and it seems like a deliberate choice. Does anyone know that one? Shout out to you in the comments. But yeah, she's picking up this jade hair ornament. She's picking up this cling ring. She's experiencing all of this. And for example, that ornament says that it's worn by commoners. And I like to think that Alethea here is developing a new perspective. And might I say, it might be that in this quest for knowledge and the soul arts and clarity, that I can't believe the real knowledge she's gaining is a better perspective of the class system of Boletaria. The Blue-Eyed Knight and the Red-Eyed Knight are also a great tutorialization in how they set parameters for what the player is expected to accomplish and what they are not expected to accomplish yet. Regardless of what order you take them on, the effect would be the same. If you kill the Blue-Eyed Knight first, then upon struggling against the Red-Eyed Knight, you have the confidence to know, hey, there are some knights I could kill and there are some I can't. If you fight the Red-Eyed Knight first, struggle, and then come across the Blue-Eyed Knight, it now kind of recontextualizes the Red-Eyed Knight as a threat too hard for you right now. This is a skill that From Software will work on for many, many years, how to teach the player what to and what not to care about. As you can see here, what they didn't anticipate was David OZ using the most broken class in the game to more or less cheese this enemy out. I'm not exactly proud of this. So much of Boletaria is so overgrown and ruined by the scourges that have happened. However, when I was investigating this area, using photo mode to just kind of look at all the details of the game, I really realized just in what pristine condition the church is surrounding on the outskirts of the wall. You would think of anything that would receive so much damage, these outer walls would be the number one thing, but the church, even being outside of the outer walls, is relatively unharmed. I'm not really sure what that says about the relationship between religion and the demons and war, although I have some guesses. I think we're going to learn a lot more later on about just the Old One and the demons and its connection to what this game calls God. I've always been really off-put by how Ostrava is hidden down here. I understand that the game tutorializes that ledge jump mechanic earlier on in the tutorial, but to say that people don't expect to do that in their FromSoft levels would be an understatement. I struggle to imagine how somebody would find that without the help of the developer messages.
Anyway, I've always liked this sequence a little bit, which makes up for it. I normally don't play ranged characters, so it was nice to sort of take on a new approach to this. I usually just jump down there and sometimes get caught in the rinse cycle, as I like to call it. Ostrava is a really neat character at first. I imagine most people who play this game are incredibly untrustworthy at this point, maybe to the point of not even speaking to somebody. However, his sort of like royal reverence to you and your bravery helps a lot to kind of tone down some of the hostility of this world, and I think it comes at an important moment. Ostrava's nobility, I think, is one of the reasons why I tend to think of Demon Souls as a little bit different than Dark Souls and other FromSoft games. It's why it still maintains that sort of high romantic fantasy aesthetic that I actually really like from the game. Now, as we said in the intro, of course, this is balanced by a subversion of those tropes. However, characters like Ostrava help to kind of balance the needle back away from the dark Lovecraftian evils of this world. Later on in the level, you will find that who is willing to sell you wares. However, I think upon talking to him, this Dregling kind of sets up some of the more important thematic objectives of this game, I would say. And look, I'll be honest, he could say it better than I can.
Knight or lowly fodder, the demons snatched their souls regardless of their station, plummeting them all into madness. And those who dare cling to their humanity were hunted down. It is the end of great Boletaria as we know it. But hell, at least the demons don't send us to our deaths in battle.
I think if I've learned anything from making this video so far, it's that I could probably make this video 40 hours. I mean, I want to talk about everything. I want to talk about how unique this little section is. I want to talk about how the fact that, and maybe I just realized this, or maybe this is pure over conjecture, but these mountains look like twin fangs. And obviously one of the more important characters in the lore are the two knights that make up the twin fangs. Made me think, oh, maybe that's where they got the name for it. Is that established somewhere in the game? Is this explained somewhere in the game and I just feel like I'm some sort of expert lore hunter for figuring this one out? Actually, don't tell me that. Let me have this. I've heard some criticism of the dragons in these games being too mechanical, almost like a ride at Disney World or a theme park. They're kind of obstacles that don't feel as if they're real. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think so much of these games do, and it makes me wonder why so much of these games are contrived in that sense. The enemies all exist in these like corners to jump out at you. There are so many sort of haunted house techniques that these games use. And truthfully, I think Demon Souls' use of dragons here is pretty admirable and very, very cool for the time. There's good reason to believe within the lore of Boletaria that dragons were the big, big bad before anything to do with demons. And that humans' relationship to dragons kind of predates any concern of soul starving. The dragon sequence here is one of the reasons why I think this level is so special. World War I of Boletaria. World 1-1 of Boletaria. It truly is one of my favorite levels in the From Software catalog. It is simple, but the use of shortcuts, the dragons, the daunting visuals of a journey just beginning. I mean, it's to me just a perfect start to a game. And obviously, as a big fan of From Software level design, I do love how the level ends where it begins. This would have blown my mind when I first played it. It was such a unique approach to level design. How cool is this? You can actually kind of like see the goop on the javelin thrown through, and it's in such amazing detail. Look, if you've already written a comment about how I didn't play the original and I should have, that kind of thing is so cool. Wait, is that in the original? I wouldn't be surprised if they did that in the original. Okay, anyway, Phalanx. At the gates of Boletaria, you fight the amorphous blob of champions once lived. The Phalanx fight is a somewhat unique encounter that's ultimately weighed down a little by a staggering lack of complexity. It falls into a pretty common theme that we will see quite a few times in these videos of once you figure the shtick out, it kind of ruins the appeal of the boss. Now, shout out to the level for foreshadowing this weakness well by providing you with lots of different fire-based attacks, but it's kind of one of those once you open this box you can't close it type of things. Phalanx is incredibly weak to fire-based attacks like this. Now, fighting him straight up with your sword can sometimes be a frustrating experience, so I don't exactly feel compelled to pull out my sword and fight him honorably like I might some other bosses. Ultimately, this boss is going to score a bit lower than the Vanguard demon, but it's still admirable in its own way when considering its uniqueness. I don't know if you caught that right there. However, there's much to be said about this character's connection, or this boss's connection to the lore, and it really does this amazing thing where the soul dissipating into the ether like that leaves an outline of a bowman. We'll talk a little bit about that archer later on in the video. Returning back to the Nexus, we'll start a cutscene and a reference to a character named the Monumental. This is absolutely one of the more bizarre moments in Demon's Souls, and I have a distinct memory of playing this for the first time, getting super lost while trying to find this character, and then at the end of the sequence feeling basically like, oh, I guess I'm not going to understand the story.
The Monumental will explain the Nexus to thee.
I'm going to try my best to sort of summarize what the Monumental is telling you here, but in a lot of ways it acts as the motivation for progressing in this game. When you think about games like Crash Bandicoot that kind of put you in these hub areas, and there are these gates, and you can go to these different worlds, right? And maybe you can do them in whatever order you want. Demon's Souls kind of acts the same way. It's this sort of old school game design thing that From Software tries really, really, really hard to make real in some way, to contextualize within the lore of the game. So these archstones were created because of a scourge, because of a colorless fog that befell the world. And, we never specifically see the scourge that actually happens to Boletaria, but we certainly see the effects of it. And this is core to the From Software kind of world design formula. A Souls game always takes place after the devastation, after the collapse, after the wars, after the shattering. Demon's Souls and the Old One, right, being responsible for all of the demons that you see in the game, tore apart the country's people and was eventually laid to rest by the Monumentals, these powerful beings that kind of defied and surpassed humanity in some way. The Monumentals then used that power, that incredible kind of supernatural power, to bind together these lands through the power of archstones. These are the portals I was talking about earlier. These stones were kind of used to cut through the colorless fog
and bind together the world again. And as far as I know, the monumentals belonging to each of these worlds, they died and were replaced eventually by demons. Thus, our role begins. Travel through the Archstones, defeat the surrogate demons, and force the Old One, who will be starving for souls as its demon soldiers fall one by one, and force that Old One to offer you a job as a demon. Yeah, when the Old One invites the player into its home, bang! Time to put it back to sleep. Roll credits. That's the plan, anyway. The crestfallen warrior at the bottom of the Nexus, and even the Monumental themselves, will tell you straight up that this plan more or less relies entirely upon the good-natured morality of you. It isn't our fault this happened. Arguably, it's entirely this baby's fault. So why do we gotta clean up their mess?
Have you the strength to bear this burden? Yes, we are fortunate indeed to have you. Now, go forth and destroy every last demon. The Old One, without demons to feed its souls, will a new servant seek and lure you to its bosom.
That ornament. That belongs to my daughter. Then she didn't make it after all. My dearest little baby. May she rest in peace. May I ask a favor? Would you mind giving me that hair ornament? I'd like to have it in memory of my daughter. You're a saint. Thank you. Thank you so much. I mustn't forget. It's not much, but please accept this as thanks. I found it discarded on the main road. It might look ordinary, but it seems to possess a strange power. Anyway, I feel that you should have it. It'll be happier in your hands.
It's times like these where I hope at least that Latria is reminded why she's here and why the defeating of these demons is important. With a renewed spirit and a better understanding of why we're here in the first place, Latria chooses to set off to Boletaria. Just kidding. Latria decides to dramatically walk to the Shrine of Storms, a great area in Demon Souls. And anyone that's played this game knows I'm going for a very specific weapon here, to the Island Shrine of the Shadow Men. Look, I can explain. I thought I had my sword out. Turns out I had my wand out. Happens to the best of us, right? Oh boy. This is... Oh my goodness. I absolutely love the Shrine of Storms. I love this sequence. I love these stairs. I hate these enemies. And absolutely do these enemies go in the pantheon of Soulsborne enemies that you have killed 10,000 times due to dying in this level. At this point, and it may not have seemed like it at first, but you get pretty dang good at memorizing their parry patterns. As you know, my character is adept with intelligence and the soul arts.
So I came to the Shrine of Storms for a very specific reason. I came to get the Crescent Falchion. But before that, you have to navigate a number of tunnels and enemies that can prove extremely difficult at this low level. You can see me trying to kind of remember where the arrows come from here. Luckily, I only take a little bit of damage. But before going up the stairs to the left here is a, well, let's just call it a Red-Eye Knight. I'm sure these guys have a name, but I'm going to deal with this enemy in a very similar way that I did the Red-Eye Knight. I don't want to hear any sort of judgments in the comments section. I am who I am. Okay, I think I deserved that. So if I remember correctly, and we'll see how good my memory is, I pick up the Crescent Falchion and make what I'm going to call a pretty terrible decision. Let's see what past David OZ does. What a great weapon, though, the Crescent Falchion. Sometimes people say that it's easy mode, but not only does it do magic damage, which is going to scale well with our stats, but it also causes bleed on enemies. You can see it's an instant equip for me. And I guess I'm testing out the movesets. But yeah, the decision that I was talking about, the terrible decision, I believe it was, hey, I'm already here. I'm already in the Shrine of Storms. Let's just go ahead and finish the level. You know? Let's just go ahead and do it. It can't be that difficult, right? One of my favorite and also most useful NPCs in the game is Grave Robber Blige, who you can find imprisoned in this first area. One of the reasons I like him so much is because he really is just a little nugget, a little encapsulation of the morality tale of Demon Souls. I mean, this is a guy who his identity is defined by his occupation, grave robbing. Not exactly the most noble of occupations. But he'll tell you straight up, he's like, I prefer being here. I mean, I gotta do what I gotta do out here, and I guess I prefer killing and stealing from the skeletons, because, you know, they're already dead. At least I don't have to do it from the soul-starved, which bums him out, I guess. In terms of morality, he's not exactly a hero, but his straightforward honesty means a lot to me, and also, in a weird way, I mean, maybe he is one of the more moral characters of the story. He definitely sells things to you at a better price than just about anyone else, and I don't know. Call me a fan. Look, the Shrine of Storms is an aesthetically interesting level with mechanics and design that frustrates me more and more every time I play it. If I could put it into a short description, I would describe all three of the levels as being ideas that are better in theory rather than in practice. The flying stingrays are a neat touch. See, it's just like this. I appreciate their design. They're cool. They look cool. They fit in the sort of the aesthetic of the world. However, they can create such a frustrating, inconsistent experience. Even with the Thief's Ring on, right? If they lock onto you, they will relentlessly attack you with hail from the sky. It's very hard to de-aggro from them, and it never feels good to play. The catacombs, for example, the tunnels underneath the ramparts, they fit so well with the enemy design, with the mood of the level. However, you quickly lose their luster as soon as you actually have to fight anything in these cramped quarters. This isn't saying anything new, but From Software's insistence on your sword colliding with walls, but your enemy's swords not colliding with the same walls, is just a fundamental breakdown of game logic that, I don't know, these games are kind of known for having consistency in.
I will never understand why From does this. I think it would add a pretty incredible sense of realism to see your enemy's sword bounce off the wall in the same way as yours, especially if you can use that as a meaningful opening for a counterattack. I always like mentioning how the shortcut here was obviously not planned by From Software. However, they didn't have any intention of fixing it because, well, if we're being honest, it's a neat little touch, right? What a cool little reward for players who think adventurously about their quest. Oh, that was kind of cool, actually. Whoa! Good job, past David O.Z. Anyway, as far as I know in the remake, I never knew about the shortcut when I played the original one, so I don't know if I would even know the answer to this, but as far as I know, that item was placed there in the remake. I'm just going to get it out there. The Adjudicator is one of my least favorite From Software bosses in any of the games, let alone Demon's Souls. First things first, the enemy has, to me at least, a half-hearted at best, but lazy at worst monster design. I've never loved when monster design substitutes like grotesquerie with fatness or gluttony. It feels a bit short-sighted, right? Where good monster design usually is supposed to use layers of horrific abstraction. These giant, sweaty, obese enemies, they seem to kind of wear their thematic intentions too broadly on their sleeves. None of that is as bad as actually fighting the boss, however. A true test of a player's threshold for tedium, the least painful way to fight this boss is exactly what you see here. A back and forth dance with boredom, a tango with tedium. Even getting to the boss is a bit of a chore. When it does hit you before you make it to him when you're descending the stairs, it oftentimes feels like there was nothing you could do. It feels glitchy, unfinished, and just a bit below whatever quality floor that From Software has developed for itself. And that's ultimately how I feel about the Adjudicator. It's not a puzzle boss, it doesn't succeed mechanically, and if I can just be honest, it's even a little bit off-putting. Score on the screen. One unique design quirk of this game is when you defeat a boss, you regain your body, and your body gives you full HP. However, for reasons we have not even gotten close to getting into, sometimes you just need to take a little jump off the highest point of the Nexus. Look, the reason I do that is so that I can get my soul form back, which, despite the health penalty, will help me in the long run due to not affecting the world tendency with my character's death. Yeah, if you haven't played this game and you are truly watching this as an introduction to Demon's Souls, I'm sorry, because it didn't make any sense to me either when I first learned about it. The Maiden in Black is one of my favorite From Software hub world matriarchs. Not only does she have like a good deal of whimsy to her, but she seems a bit more involved in the story and supportive of you, the main character here, the player, I should say. And it develops this really interesting identity to the Nexus, which is it's a place of respite. It's a place of genuine caring people in a way that, you know, sometimes Dark Souls, for example, the hubs kind of act as an area to encourage a atmosphere of hostility or of despondency or of an uncaring approach that those games are so known for. I don't get that from the Nexus. Instead, I get this sort of collective sympathy. The sound design in the remake is so important to the experience of Demon Souls. And let's be clear, as it was for the original as well. I mean, there's so little non-diegetic sounds in this world. If you are consistent and you go through areas and kill them all, maybe you've done this before. I'm sure you have if you've played any of these games, but you make a real effort to eliminate every single enemy in a given area. And when you do that in the remake, there's just this haunting quiet. And every level has a different version of that haunting quiet. You can hear things in the background. The Tower of Latria is an obvious one, but even just beasts and groans and texture from the outside world kind of seeps into the level. And if you haven't before, I would highly encourage you to, well, kind of do exactly what's happening here, which is to navigate this game in these areas with this very slow pace and use all of your senses. Okay. Maybe not all of them, but use your senses to develop the world around you, and it will just increase your enjoyment, I promise.
The Lord's Path, just over there, is now a feeding ground for dragons. Have your wits about you.
I really like how, well, just the simplicity of Ostrava's character and how he kind of acts as this genuinely earnest guide throughout this world. Yes, there is more to Ostrava's story, but so often in the future, characters and NPCs in Dark Souls, for example, are littered with unknowable deceptions and motivations that, you know, you may not understand until your third or fourth playthrough. While Ostrava is certainly capable of that, maybe the option is there in your mind in a first playthrough. I'm really impressed how Demon Souls plays his character out so earnestly. He really is a pretty straightforward character with a straightforward goal in mind. And he has no ill will toward you. He warns you about the dragons. As you can see, that served me very well. And he is a center, a moral center for your journey specifically.
Thank you. That's twice now. Time to forge ahead. This is a token of my gratitude. Please accept it.
Given the hostile nature of this game and the duplicitous nature of so many of its characters, including some of its main characters, I think the decision to make Ostrava wholly, WHOLLY, wholly dedicated to a cause and willing to take you along with him, serves the game well, and it also allows for just, you know, an enormous gut punch near the end of the game. Something that the future games will try time and time again to recapture. I'm going to do a little bit of From Software glazing here and say it's important to remember just how lucky we are that we have a game like Elden Ring. As long as I've played these games, and I know this is the case for you all too, you see things like this and you just say, I want more. I want to go there. it's cool that we have that option now. Back to Ostrava. I mean, the funny part of me commending him on his earnestness, on his kindness and honesty, is that he is by nature duplicitous as well. He is Prince Alant, the son of the king. Shrouded in gold, he kind of moves through this world on the same exact journey you do. A very similar path with shockingly similar goals. Find the king, figure out what happened. It's obviously a bit more personal for Ostrava. One funny part of From Software's game design in general, and maybe one of the more ironic failures for its fans to understand, is just how much it emphasizes and moralizes asking for help. You, the player, help Ostrava 3 times in this adventure. The game doesn't treat him as a failure or as pathetic for that fact, but instead as one of the few shining lights in Boletaria. He is presented in this game as different from its other characters. I'm sure if you're deep into this YouTube thing deep enough into this YouTube thing to find this video, you're familiar with the mythology of Miyazaki, the game director's, his story on getting assistance from strangers on the side of the road. You know, it's one of those things where it's kind of become this cultural telephone. It reminds me a lot of Kingdom Hearts, actually, and the story about how there was a Disney CEO and like a Square Enix CEO, and that they met on this elevator and kind of spawned the idea of Kingdom Hearts and that in a literal elevator pitch. But the story goes that, you know, Miyazaki had some sort of car trouble on the side of the road that was holding up traffic, and through the cooperation of many, many people, strangers, crucially, they were able to help him get over to the side of the road or over the hill or whatever and clear up traffic again. And the important takeaway that Miyazaki had from this was, well, all those people had to get back in their car or get out of the way so traffic could continue to flow. And, you know, they entered his personal world, right? Did something kind and then left before anybody could know who it was, before any phone numbers could have been exchanged, before anything. And that had a real impact on him. And clearly this is reflected in the gameplay of the summoning signs, of the summoning in general, the developer messages, the messages from other players. It's really, really important, I think, that the game wants to make a point that Ostrava and you, the player, are better off together than being apart from each other. And this paired with the sort of developer messages and oftentimes, I would say most of the time, helpful player messages. To me, it's a clear stance that the game is taking on the importance of jolly cooperation. I think a lot of people tend to see the invasion system or see the player messages as inherently designed to be trolly, to be manipulated for players to use these how uncharitably, I guess. And I think by and large those systems are designed for player agency and kind of emergent gameplay. But I do kind of think, and this is, I guess, speculation or just my own personal read of it, that those systems were put into the game optimistically, that they are designed with a moral, clear conscience, I guess, that they were designed there to help emphasize and contribute to the game's opinions on cooperation. You might think, your gut reaction might be that Ostrava meets a tragic end. How could this game be saying something good about it? He's clearly not rewarded. But I would encourage you to think about what he chooses to do in his final moments that sort of defines what he knows to be most important from his journey. It's a lesson he learned from a stranger, but we'll get there eventually. I do think the second level of Boletaria ends up being one of the weaker stages in the game for a couple different reasons. For one, and this is just, again, sort of speculation on my part. It certainly feels the most video gamey. You know what this level reminds me of more than just about any other? Is that gosh darn bridge level from Crash Bandicoot. And the comparisons go further than just the fact that they're bridges, right? It's it comes down to, yes, level design, but also just sort of a strict brutality in its difficulty and a very prescriptive way of dealing with it. When you kind of find out this level's gimmick, you realize, oh, you know, it's kind of the only way you can tackle this is through this very sort of rigorous scripted timing game. And one of the reasons why I don't love that is that, well, these games are meant to take those expectations and ask the player, well, does it really have to be that way? And look, it's not that big of a deal. I just find that the developers from Software, they get so much better at creating these naturalistic worlds, and they start making levels that, you know, hardly even feel like levels. They're interconnected, all of these different things that you know so well from these games. Whereas this one absolutely feels like a level. I feel like I need to really work on this point. Give me 1 second. I'm going to write this down. The Lord's Path is just a bit too simple, to be honest. Linear combat trials aren't the worst thing in the world, and it isn't even necessarily just the dragon obstacle, which I think looks great and is a reasonable way of presenting the challenge. My main gripe comes from the level's reliance on its lack of space as essentially the only form of challenge the entire way through. The worst offender of this is not the dragon. It's an underrated thing, which is those dogs in the lower section of the level. It's an absolute death trap meant to eviscerate you without much ability to respond. The main form of interacting with this level is a slow crawl, an inching of my character to aggro one enemy at a time. I feel like every time I play it, I have to kind of break the AI a little bit. It's a frustratingly prescriptive way of playing that also, yes, applies to avoiding the dragon. And it all kind of culminates in a level that really challenges my ability to move on one axis more than any other skill. I am all for changing up the design of a level to present a hyper-specific challenge, even if it is straightforward. However, this specific type of play, I think, just occupies far too much of this level's bandwidth. And it's funny because I do kind of think the boss of this level carries that prescriptive design as well. However, I think it does it a bit more delicately. My writer brain really struggles to put into words how amazing this fight is for so many different reasons, and how I think that I am a victim to maybe this prescriptive design more than just about anyone else. You know, there's a trophy for beating this boss without killing any of the archers, and you'll notice that upon walking through the fog door, I almost just like walk by the Tower Knight like a stranger in a grocery store to get to these archers. I have half a mind to suggest that maybe this fight would be better if you couldn't access them. It's almost like, of course I'm going to photo vote. It's almost like the inclusion of the archers is kind of a solve, right? A fix to exactly the problem that I was suggesting earlier, which is once you defeat them, all of a sudden
Tower Knight becomes this rote sort of exercise in just moving back and forth, much like the level before it. This is nothing to say about the boss's presentation. I mean, what a marvel, truly marvelous experience fighting this boss can be, especially for the first time. The point I'm really trying to make here is that fighting Tower Knight for the first time is gonna be probably the best time. Once you figure out a boss like Tower Knight out, I mean, it kind of changes it in your brain. I find it specifically hard to kind of get over that impulse to play it optimally, if that makes sense. Maybe that's a me problem. Regardless, this fight is completely carried by its presentation. You get a little more context into the story, but as far as an enemy that thematically and mechanically caps off a level that is defined by trial, that is meant to be a stalwart barrier between you and the kingdom, I'm not sure there's like a better choice than Tower Knight for the boss of this level. I just wish I could get in there and close off those staircases. I really think it would improve the fight. On the screen now is some footage from when I went through this series, defeating every boss in order to make a video where I review every boss. And as you can see, I'm doing super duper well on it. Maybe it is just sort of a philosophical judgment call, right? How important is a first-time playthrough when my first-time playthrough was years and years ago? How much should I consider a boss's gimmick being solved as a detriment to the boss itself? But hovering above all of that conversation is a staggering accomplishment in effective enemy presentation. We've spoken a bit about Demon Souls' use, how it uses traditional fantasy affair to create a certain atmosphere and expectation, and then finds unique ways to twist those expectations around. Tower Knight is one of those images that come to my mind when I'm considering that fact. And the fact that he is an enemy that caps off a level that is meant to be a literal barrier between you and the kingdom the entire game is based around, well, I can excuse a little mechanical tedium. This is the function of the rubric on screen, after all. Say hello to the top spot Tower Knight. Before I move on, I returned back to World 1-2 to take out that pesky dragon. For your sake, I've sped up this footage, but let me know if there is an easier way to do this. You do get a boss soul from doing this, and it gives you world tendency, which we will talk about here shortly. When you look at it this way, yeah, the dragon is pretty contrived, pretty robotic. Imagine if I just kept playing this the entire time. Really pad out that video length. Get that one YouTube commenter from every video that says, wow, really stretching for the 10-minute YouTube length, video length. You guys know what I'm talking about. You know, it's been a long time since I made a YouTube video. Maybe you're an old fan or this is your first time listening. This video is pretty different, but things have been weird in my life the last couple years. Good a lot of times, but just a reminder, I've entered my 30s. Growing up is weird. Okay. So yeah, we're back at 1-1 here. We're back at World 1-1 here, and a really neat part of this game that, as far as I know, just does not show up again in any of these FromSoft games is the idea of world tendency. So we've done a lot of good things. We've defeated a lot of demons, right? And the world is responding to the fact that we've done that, which is pretty neat. So the gate that we went through when we came over here was not open when we originally started the game. Because we've done so well, we've defeated a lot of demons, we haven't died in human form, I know that the world tendency is bright enough to
to allow us to enter this area. It's a really neat space. It kind of gives a little more like environmental context for the executions that have been happening outside of Boletaria. You meet an interesting executioner character up here as well, but it's a special moment, I think, in the game where it rewards especially explorative players. Note how I am still making an effort to kind of investigate every single element of these levels. I did not know that was going to happen. I must have wiped that from my memory. That's what we call the spin cycle. You can see under the title card there, the eye is completely white, which means we're in pure white world tendency, which is a good thing. Here I am fighting the executioner, and every once in a while I'm both impressed and kind of confused at how the Demon Souls remake has been able to maintain certain elements of the From Software experience kind of like this. I'm interested how you all feel. Like, we play these games to be challenged, to be immersed, to have this very like emergent, every time we play it, we encounter something that's maybe more challenging or less challenging than the last time. We feel growth. So it's not like I'm trying to duck every single challenging experience, but when something like that happens to me where an enemy glitches out, part of me does kind of like get hearts in my eyes, and I sort of get excited because, well, it feels like a victory in and of itself. I'm not sure why or how I got to this. Oh God, we got to talk about this too. But oh my God, when I am able to take out an enemy in a way that feels broken, it does feel like a little bit of a reclamation of my agency in this game, or in these games. So much is trying to kill you at so many times, and you're kind of always on edge. And when you can kind of get one over on the literal software, right? To me, it always is a bit satisfying. Like, haha, now who's struggling? It isn't me anymore, it's you. And I'm actually talking to like a PlayStation 3 game. Anyway, maybe that's just me. These platforming sections have become sort of just as much of a gameplay motif as poison swamps. If you go through the catalog, I'm pretty sure there's one of these in each game. I'm actually struggling to remember one in Sekiro, but I'm sure that's just because I'm just trying to think off the top of my head here. The one from Bloodborne down through the tower, or if you've played Elden Ring, you absolutely know the platforming challenge from that one. Oh my goodness. They have me very conflicted as a From Software fan. It feels as if it is a challenge that isn't earned, right? But at the same time, I kind of admire their commitment to doing it every single game. They remind me a little bit of like mini games in a JRPG, or any game really, where they're kind of put in here and they're janky and they never really feel right. However, they kind of bring almost this implicit joke between the developer and you, where it's like, look, this is not what this system or this software is designed to handle, but it's not that serious. And when I frame it that way, I kind of enjoy them after a while. It takes a real strong person, though, when you've died 10 times, to walk away and say, hey, I'm going to try this another time, instead of going for an 11th. Couldn't be me.
Our little town. Oh, it's a nice wee place.
All those lizard-eyed townsfolk are busy tinkering with stone and don't bother with old folk like me. Makes life rather easy for me. I can get away with anything. I always knew there was a god. Thanks for looking out for me.
As we go into the first levels of the Stonefang Tunnels, I just want to take a second to point out how special and unique the voice acting in these games are. One thing that the remake I'll just say it. One thing I think the remake does fail at is the facial animation. It's uncanny in a way that kind of betrays the very iconic uncanniness from the original games. If you'll remember, some of them, their mouths don't move. They track you in this very terrifying way. Whereas these attempt to have an uncanniness of realism, which I think misses the mark. I think the player character, like the characters you can create, I think those faces look pretty amazing in this. But like Stockpile Thomas, for example, or some of the other NPCs in this game look off in a way that maybe they were going for, but misses the point of how the NPCs look off in the original games. And it's not just their looks, right? It's the giggling after everything that's not funny. The fact that the way almost every NPC in these games talk is as if they're in on a joke that you're not aware of. They look at you and talk to you as if, oh man, they have no idea what they're getting themselves into. And I think that social cue really actually comes through implicitly in the voice acting and in the experience of playing the game. I think it does create a lot of atmosphere and tone, especially when you enter a new area. The hitboxes on explosions and these falling rocks in this game is just so bogus. It exists way longer than the animation does. And anyway, there's a lot of neat moving parts in this level, and I think for most players, this is probably the first place they go to outside of Boletaria. It does a really good job of building into its world design the fact that these different worlds that you visit through the Archstones are actually going to be kind of connected to the different upgrade materials. So this level goes a long way to explain to the player, like, hey, here is where you're going to be getting weapon upgrading stones, and here is where you are going to be getting the ore, and the place where you do upgrade your weapons. It's a unique design that does kind of carry forward that what we talked about earlier, that kind of old style of level design, or I should say like world design, not level design. But in my opinion, it works well, and I'm happy to see it in this game. I think that it's probably a casualty of the games going so more open world or more interconnected later on, which is fine. That's I would rather have it the way that Dark Souls does it in the long run, but it is a good example of just creative thinking when it comes to probably what was restrictions that From Software had on their game development at the time. Always happy to come up here and take these guys out. One of the reasons why I had originally gone to the Shrine of Storms to get the Crescent Falchion, you remember that so long ago, was to be better equipped for this area. A magic build and a magic weapon in a lot of ways trivializes this area completely. You'll notice I'll cut through a lot of these enemies no problem, but imagine coming here without the weapon and you realize a lot of these miners, miners, are pretty tanky without the magic weapons. Let's look at the level design here and compare it to some of my complaints with World 1-2, and just point out, when I say that the geometry of the levels
takes something away from the combat. I think you can see a good example of it not happening here. This level... oh my god. This level, what hilarious timing for that to happen. This level kind of mixes and matches claustrophobic areas and more open areas with a lot of different angles of attack pretty well. And I actually think this might be one of the more underrated stages in the From Software catalog, at least insofar how it like absolutely develops and changes over time. If you enter this area with the vista and everything, and even this open first area, and then compare it to the sort of like cavernous, spider web filled, atmospheric, deep cave that you go to at the end, it's always shocking for me to remember, like, oh, this is actually the same level all the way through. It's pretty expansive. If I have any issue, it's probably just with the enemy design or the repetitive enemy design. The fat officials are an absolute pain. They're a little bit too tanky, and they do a lot of damage. And I feel as if playing through this level, something like the Crescent Falchion is absolutely a necessity. It's pretty painful to play through without it. But notice how this level does weave in and out through open areas and claustrophobic areas, like I was saying, but also how it gives spatial challenges like this one. I might die here, yeah. What was past David Oz thinking? That should be the title of this video. For a lot of reasons. Okay, I'm going to press stop recording now. There's a lot of storytelling that happens within the walls of Stonefang Tunnels. You can piece together simple parts of storytelling, like the fact that not all of these enemies will attack you on sight. There's some characterization going on about these workers, about their priorities. But then there's storytelling and the enemy placement as well. The fat official, who is flanked by seemingly rabid attack dogs. Their placement amongst the workers. You start to develop kind of a sense of the structure of who's in charge, without the game actually telling you that. It seems simple, obviously. However, I think this kind of storytelling happens a lot in your brain without you realizing it, and then is later contextualized through NPC dialogue. Hidden away in Stonefang Tunnel is Blacksmith Ed here. Maybe looks similar to someone you met in the Nexus. I think, unfortunately, one of Demon Souls' biggest flaws is its weapon upgrading system. Even when Ed here explains it, well, it sounds cool and it sounds in-world. It's no more convincing to me as a system than any wiki or Reddit post or explanation guide that I've seen online. I'm going to read to you all of the available upgrade materials in Demon Souls. You have Hardstone and Sharpstone, Clearstone, Greystone, Bladestone, Dragonstone, Suckerstone, Mercury Stone, Marrowstone, Moonlight Stone, Moodshade Stone, two different things by the way, Faint Stone, Spider Stone, Cloud Stone, Melt Stone, and then of course Demon Souls. Now, if you said, well, you don't have to use most of those, I agree. That is part of the problem. It is a hyper complex situation with many different moving parts, none of which is totally necessary. So in a weird way, I almost would ask the game to more or less either simplify it or make me engage with this system in a more rigid way. As it is right now, I've never not been able to play this game by just taking a weapon,
upgrading it with hard and sharp stones, and moving on with my life. While normally that would not be an issue, to me I think it is due to just the sheer amount of drops and items that you find in upgrade materials, all of which oftentimes go to waste. I think the future games do figure this out quite a bit, but if you want to better understand my point, you might look to Elden Ring and the way that so many of the items in that game are ultimately meaningless to your adventure. I would have really liked to have seen the game find more creative ways through its enemy design to encourage me to use these upgrade materials. However, as I see it right now, I just don't have a meaningful reason to do so, and it's quite a complex farming type of situation to even have it happen at all. I remember doing it a little bit for the Platinum Trophy years ago. I'm thankful the games do provide a simple upgrade path. Of course, that's great. I would just encourage you to think, why then is there all of this superfluous stuff on top of it? I think it's a good example of the game grasping for complexity and having a kind of a goal in mind, whereas the ladder that it uses to climb to that goal is very, very disorganized and messy. By the time you make it to this contraption that does the very cool thing, which I am usually always in support of you going through a level, moving something, doing something, and it opens up a different layout for the level that you just went through. Once you do this, it kind of strikes you like, okay, we've been doing this for a while. We must be getting near the boss, right? It's funny because we are going to enter into a room that might as well be a boss if you ask David OZ. I might be engagement farming here, but I want to encourage everyone in the comments to please post, where in Demon Souls do you die the most? Because for whatever reason, very few things in this game strike fear into my heart like this guy. It's like I lose brain functioning. I mean, look at these rolls. What am I doing? I'm just whiffing. Rolling backwards into that. It's like it's like all of the motor functioning in my hands goes away. And when I do actually end up killing this enemy, I feel, okay, I did it. I beat the level. I'm not afraid of the boss. I'm not afraid of spiders. I'm afraid of that guy. Like I said, a huge shout out to this level and its variety as you go through it. Super underrated. Some foreshadowing right here. This is cute. Once you get to the end of this level, you should have a number of upgrade materials, but you should also have the knowledge as a player, like, okay, I can come back here if I need more. All we have is one thing left to do: defeat the boss and get out. As we descend further into the mines and maybe further into madness if you don't have a magic weapon, I think this boss is, well, I think this boss is a bit of a disappointment. Much like an animatronic in a haunted house, the armor spider's effectiveness kind of wears away once you turn the lights on. There's only, 4 or 5 different attacks here, and one of my biggest issues with them is that I don't think they do enough damage to warrant any kind of fear or concern. On top of all of that is this attack, in which he fills up... Why am I gendering the armored spider? where he fills up the entire room full of this lava with really no other function other than for you to be pushed back. So you have to do this once more, which is avoid the projectiles. Once you make it back, however, you start the response of just, well, it's not even really a traditional boss conversation, because when the armor spider does make contact with you, especially if you have the heater shield, well, ultimately, it doesn't do enough. I think this is where a lot of the mechanics of Demon Souls, especially if you've played the game a lot like I have, start to rub up against its fun. The unlimited healing on offer. Wow, see, even that, which was just a complete failure in positioning on my part, I'm able to make it out of. But with unlimited healing, with 100% block shields, with magical weapons, it's pretty clear that some of these bosses just become solved instantly. This is becoming a bit of a theme. Maybe what we're learning about David OZ is that I don't love putting artificial constraints on myself to have the pressure or the obligation to make a boss fun be based on me nerfing my own character. I don't know. Try as I might, I've also not found much of a reason why a giant armored spider is down here and why it's a demon. The lore connection here is very difficult for me to draw. And while I can imagine a spider kind of growing and getting more powerful, defeating its other spiders and gaining a demon soul or demonhood, this one just falls short in terms of that connection piece to the wider story or the wider game. Its presentation is okay, its mechanics are pretty poor, and there is no lore to be found, placing Armored Spider pretty low in our ranking. Let's move on. The next world we're going to be heading to is 3-1, an area called the Tower of Latria. We're going to be navigating the Prison of Hope. Yes, this Orwellian branding for this beautiful location here, as you can see, is pretty accurate, especially when you realize this has got to be the hardest area in the game. Yeah, for sure, and for a lot of different reasons. It also might be my favorite area in the game, and I think it portends, right? It is a good moment that you can look to say, okay, From Software was built different, and maybe they hadn't nailed everything right in Demon Souls, but you can see so much of Dark Souls, of Bloodborne's DNA in this level. It's insane. Let's talk about it for a bit. Actually, before we get there, I was kind of scrounging through my Google Drive looking for anything I have written before on Demon Souls, and I found this really interesting old script where I wrote a little bit about the Tower of Latria. I'm going to read this from you. This is probably written 3 or 4 years ago. It's probably very, very wordy in a way that I used to write. So for those of you who might be saying to themselves through this video, man, I miss the old David OZ. Here he comes. It's why I think the shining moment of Demon Souls, in terms of the marriage of all of its components, probably comes in the first level of the Tower of Latria, a labyrinthian odyssey through layers and layers of a dense prison, what with its cobblestone rocks and cellmates absolutely dripping in atmospheric grime and filth. The really inappropriately named Prison of Hope is made interesting both by the muddy ambiguity of the original's visuals, but also the visceral realness of the remake's recreation. It is a stage that finds itself acting as a weird precursor for so many of the series' strengths going forward, from eldritch horror to the vertical layers that characterize so many Dark Souls games in the future. Yeah. Let's keep moving.
Latria begs the player to undergo a sort of thorough search of its halls that you don't get in the previous levels. Finding keys is one thing, but the pressure to open every door and search every nook and cranny encourages more and more opportunities for the haunting denizens of Latria to find you. If the enemies of Latria were placed in, say, the open cliffs of the Shrine of Storms, then they would pose little threat and even less fear. Because of their number and claustrophobic placement, simple enemies become genuine concerns that appear in your peripheral vision, like imprisoned phantoms. Stage 1 of Latria might be the longest stage to go through as well, especially on your first go. The methodical room clearing is punctuated by 3 NPC events, including one that provides a diegetic soundtrack to your horror movie adventure. If you emerge from the prison unscathed, well, it is then time for rolling. If you make it through that trap, either by sheer mechanical will or exploratory cleverness, then you are faced with a final NPC fight and a boss that tests your damage, awareness, and exploration. But that was a lot, so let me be very clear. Stage 1 of the Tower of Latria hits on 3 different stages of Souls game goodness. Number 1, combat and endurance. There are multiple rooms to be cleared with a dense amount of trash mob enemies that test your endurance and ability to manage numbers. These enemies are balanced by the difficult but manageable Mind Flayer enemies that are most effective when they appear amongst a number of the Thrall type enemies. Number 2, exploration. Latria Stage 1 uses a series of keys that unlock different doors and passageways that systematically open up the level design onion that is the 4 or so floors of the tower. Managing all of that will leave you with a pretty accurate mental map of each floor, what with their broken floors and ambushing enemies. Anyone who has played Demon Souls all the way through most likely knows permanently the path they take from the Archstone to the boss room. This is all punctuated with a test of your exploration by making the demise of the boss tied to an NPC that you have to find. Finally, narrative. The Prison of Hope might be the stage most full of NPC events and events tied to the world tendency system in Demon Souls. There are 2 important NPC quests available here, as well as a merchant and a number of NPC invasions that have unique fights with difficult enemies. Not only that, but there are also a number of environmental storytelling elements that are used effectively, such as the wailing of a certain prisoner singing. The remake really shines here, using 3-dimensional sound in a way that haunts you as you progress through the stage. Stage 3-1 really exists as an amazing precursor to Dark Souls, insofar that it creates a level that sprawls outward from a starting point that exists within the exact middle of the eye of the storm that is the prison. Gonna break out from past David OZ here to mention that I remember in college when I discovered that I could write insofar in an essay, and it's all one word. Man, you just couldn't beat that feeling, throwing in a insofar. AI is gonna ruin this, by the way. And nothing beats discovering that you could say insofar in an essay. I spammed that thing like healing grass in this game. Okay, the Archstone starts you on the 3rd floor, not fully at the top and not simply just ascending the tower from below. It is this sort of vertically centralized labyrinth that later games, especially Dark Souls, became famous for. Think of the ways in which Firelink Shrine is located in the middle ground between New Londo Ruins and the Undead Burg, where most games define their level design as point A to B, as climbing something or descending somewhere. Demon Souls began the process of subverting that trend toward more naturalistic world design, starting you in places where the first direction isn't always clear. Most other levels in Demon Souls haven't quite figured that out yet, unfortunately, with some of the growing pains being seen in a number of the stages. The worst stages in this regard are the cavernous tunnels of 2-2 and the ever-annoying poison swamps of Stage 5-2, both of which we'll get to soon. Regardless of the fact that this motif was given life in Demon Souls and would grow to fester and writhe in Souls games going forward, the poison swamp here is as bare bones and impotent as we will see. Dang! I don't know if I agree with that. I just kind of jumped to that, by the way, but calling 5-2 bare bones and impotent. We'll see if present David OZ agrees with past David OZ later in the video.
If anything, though, these stages are made especially disheartening in a playthrough just based on the fact that so many strides have been made in Soulsborne levels. All right, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about here. We'll get back to our regularly scheduled programming soon, but you know, it's fun to do this. I don't know if I can speak for other video editors, other video essayists, but I would just write scripts or start writing a script and then abandon it. I've mentioned this before, but I probably have 15,000 words on the Halo games sitting around. My Assassin's Creed video was taken from a full Assassin's Creed retrospective I wanted to do. I just took parts of that and kind of repurposed it. My Google Drive is like a poison swamp in and of itself of just stupid ideas that don't see the light of day. It's why whenever I start something where I'm really making a video, I will often go, okay, have I done this before? There's genuinely so much about this level that I have just an abundance of conflicting thoughts about. You know, for one, I do think this level might be too difficult or too hard. I know that sounds crazy to some of you who have just played these games a million times, but what it does with its Archstone is at the very least pushing the boundaries, the constraints. If you imagine the systems of this game at a box, this level is expanding them so much that it is straining the walls of that box, in my opinion, to the point of breaking them. What I mean by that is that these games function on one checkpoint or one archstone per level, right? Not in the sort of interconnected way that the future games do, where you can take them on from different angles, or maybe you even find multiple bonfires on the same level, right? This is just one, and it tries to fix that problem, or I say problem, but it tries to alleviate some of it by allowing you, the player, to sort of chip away at the level. Meaning you gather keys, you open doors with those keys, and you develop shortcuts and a mental map in your head. This is all great and functionally like the backbone of these games, right? However, I don't think that the actual shortcut system or the mental map really do much in terms of providing you a simple way back to the boss room or back to your souls wherever you died if you maybe fell off in a platforming challenge or forgot that there was a hole in the floor and went careening to your death. Maybe I'm just being soft, but this level does wear on me in a way that the other ones don't in terms of the endurance that it asks of me. I mean, even when you have unlocked that door to the right of the bonfire, when you've taken down the trap where you have to roll through it, which you can see me approaching now, even after all of that, it is still quite a journey to get back. And when you pair this up with the way that the boss functions, where you have to defeat this sort of necromancer enchanter that lives above the boss room, I do think, again, that I see... Look at me go here. Do I make this? Oh, yeah, I got this. Easy peasy. I do think that whatever amount of things that have to add up to where it does break through the walls of this box that I was talking about, this level probably has reached it. In order to defeat the boss, you must first defeat this animator that appears above the boss room. And it's very possible to go into the boss room, try and defeat the boss, and realize that you can't. And, this is definitely an opportunity for the player messaging system to thrive, for online guides, and best case scenario for the player's own explorative kind of nature to come over. But like I said, I do find this maybe a bridge too far in terms of complexity shoved into one level.
But a humble servant, I do not wish to interfere. I won't cause you trouble. I won't. What do you want? I won't cause you trouble.
I can hear you typing now that it's really not that big of a deal, or that maybe I'm being too critical, but while I could recognize the importance of doing this, it forces the player to make a decisive decision. It rewards someone for going out and exploring, for being creative in their problem solving. I have distinct memories of me bouncing off this part of the game pretty heavily and being very unsure of myself. The intended effect of this being a moment. Oh, and yeah, this is another one. I mean, this enemy is no joke and arguably harder than the boss itself. Wow. That was dramatic right through the heart. And it's just another thing layered on top of it. So the intended effect of this being this moment where of player empowerment, where maybe I feel really proud of myself for overcoming this challenge of not being able to defeat the boss, absolutely did not happen for me. And it kind of soured what was a truly, truly great experience. If you would allow me some time to keep yapping about this, just because I do find this level maybe the most interesting of any level in this game. One thing I do like about the animator, and I'm not really sure what to call him. I'm sure he has a name, lore hunters out there. But one thing I really like about that enemy, and one thing I really like about the boss, is it does force you to confront the idea that there are forces in this world controlling other things, that there are duplicitous people, not duplicitous like we've mentioned before, which is like sort of characters who maybe have one motivation but aren't showing it, like literally dual personalities or imposters. I think for a lot of players, this is the first time that they're going to be truly confronted with that in the game, and it should open up all of these different kind of speculative doors in their head where they go, okay, hold up. So this is a core function of the world. There are people that can control other people. There are people that can act as other people or be a false idol. And all of a sudden, your trust or your understanding of other characters in the world, maybe even important characters you've heard a lot about, changes in that moment. In this level, you will meet so many characters, including Sage Frake, who will tell you their experience, and immediately upon opening the doors to this cathedral, it kind of recontextualizes it. Okay, if I can't trust the boss, then who can I trust? Who else is being animated? Who else is lying? And again, it's not just lying. It's not just a duplicitous nature. We haven't gotten there yet, but maybe the most important, maybe the climax of the entire story is somebody impersonating someone else. And I do appreciate how this level starts that ball rolling down the hill. I'd love to hear your thoughts on me essentially in short terms saying that the Prison of Hope level is too hard, but I kind of stand by it. As much as I love this level, and it might be my favorite, I do think they are cramming the box a little bit too full. I don't know about that metaphor. This boss absolutely falls into the category, like most of these bosses, if not all of them. Maybe a couple actually that don't. But into it has a gimmick, you figure it out, it makes things a lot easier. Weirdly, though, I'm going to jump in and just say that actually this boss's gimmick or puzzle to be solved is probably higher on my list of in terms of those mechanics being effective on me. So why I think that is really because it doesn't solve the boss. Now, it makes things dramatically easier for you and you understand it a little bit better, but understanding the gimmick here actually isn't the end of the battle. The Fool's Idol spawns multiple copies of themselves. We know this. But the way that you can tell, or the gimmick that I'm referring to, is that the arrow, the magic spell that the quote-unquote real one sends out is different than the fake ones. So what you'll see me do is kind of hover around cover or these pillars, not very well here, and just right there, I found the bigger soul arrow. So now I've identified which enemy I need to go after to properly do damage to the boss. Now, as you can see, it's still a challenging scenario where I have to navigate the pillars and the cover in the level design to get to the boss to do damage. But I've found myself a great advantage. Oh my goodness. I guess the Fool's Idol weirdly serves as a good... I don't love the boss, that's why I say it's weirdly, but as a good example of maybe how to do a puzzle-style boss like this and maintain the integrity of the challenge. I am not without my complaints, though, and if you've ever heard me talk about any sort of competitive game, multiplayer shooter, MOBA, anything like that, on my list of absolute non-negotiables are abilities or obstacles that completely restrict your movement as a player. I think that by and large, developers should see this as just a no-go right away, taken down in the writers' meeting or in the design meeting. If someone has the idea to restrict the player's movement, just nip that in the bud right there. I don't think it feels good. I think it's never an enjoyable experience for the player, and I think there are so many more creative ways that you could kind of hinder the player. So right away, the runes that appear on the ground like that, that fully stop you and just make you get pelted by soul arrows, is not an interesting challenge in my opinion, and just frankly feels terrible to play. I would have liked to have seen a couple different spells or ideas other than the runes on the ground. Maybe that one spell that you can kind of use to like knock enemies back around you. It sort of comes out of you and pushes you back. If you approach the wrong idol, maybe you get pushed back or thrown into the church pews. That could be cool. Ultimately, once you get to the boss and once you start swinging your sword, the fight loses a lot of anything that makes it interesting. And this boss firmly kind of escapes from my memory most times that I play this game. It does not have all that lasting of an impact on me, but it's not bad. I should also say that it does commit another, in my opinion, cardinal sin for video game design. It's weird that this has two just absolute David O.Z. no-fly zone elements to it. And you're about to see it. It's if you approach something in a level, right, it takes you out of the level without you kind of opting into that fact. This drives me crazy, especially in sort of story-based games. You can see, yeah, I know that it's going to happen. I'm hugging the wall, right, to get this item because I know that if you approach this altar, that it takes you to a cutscene and brings you to the next level and you can't come back. I just think this is frankly immoral, all right? Just a cruel and unusual thing to do to players. It happens in games all the time. You open a door thinking you're exploring, all of a sudden a cutscene starts. I would love in a level that is so challenging to get through to have some sort of, hey, are you ready to move on? But maybe that's just unreasonable. Maybe I ask for too much. You thought I forgot about the ranking, didn't you? Here I am from my gameplay from a couple years ago Ultimately, I come away from this fight feeling a little bit indifferent. There are elements of this boss that I appreciate, most of them coming from a thematic or presentation standpoint, and there are elements that I can find the value in if I squint my eyes. So this boss is going to, I think, appear to be ranked pretty high this early on in our rankings. I'll remind you that we're going to be trying to do every single boss in all of these games. But I think it will even out in the end to be what I would consider a maybe a little bit below mid-tier From Software boss with some interesting ideas that fit the wider thematic objectives of the game, which I do appreciate.
Do you have a connection to the disciples? Do not pay any attention to them if they speak poorly of me and my magic. Prayer is for the foolish, quaint, and soon-to-be dead. And heaven forbid the day you find out what their so-called God really is.
An item in this game called the Talisman of Beasts suggests that what this world calls God and the Old One are actually the same entity. Clearly, the members of the Nexus and the world at large are not in total agreement on this fact, or what even the soul arts consist of, or where they originate from. Sage Frake is one of the more interesting characters in this game because of how he shows the corrupting capabilities of the soul arts. But how his logic and understanding of them actually asks the player to consider, is that even an issue at all? Is Frake an evil character? Sure, in as much as any of the other hyper-aspirational characters are in the Nexus. What makes him any different than what you are doing in the game, however? Both Frake and our player character, Latria, I think, are somewhat kindred spirits and act as a really neat bit of storytelling for our little headcanon here. Since Latria is so concerned with knowledge, Frake acts as one of the devils on her shoulder, telling her what to do and convincing her with promises of unseen knowledge. He can see beyond, he tells her. He can grant unimaginable power if you just bring him all the demon souls. As we will learn one day long from now, maybe 3 more videos from now, is that insight into the unknown is hardly a painless journey. I love the Ritual Path level, or Shrine of Storms 2, on a similar level that I do the first stage of Shrine of Storms. I love the presentation, I love the insistence on rain and cliffside treachery, I love the beginning half of this stage with the Reaper and Patches and Saint Urbain. I do not love the second half, a trial of railroaded progression that challenges patience more than clever exploration. I like to chalk it up to a type of level design that FromSoft has sort of abandoned, with good reason. In hindsight, the Ritual Path is a ghost of FromSoft past, and it is somewhat endearing for it. By the way, this will also apply to the second level of the Stonefang Tunnels. Back to Demon Souls NPCs, though, and just how different they are compared to other video games from the time. We have this really interesting triangle forming in just the Ritual Path level. We have Grave Robber Blige, who I talked about before, a man who wishes to selfishly take for himself but is unwilling to kill others. We have Patches, a man who will take whatever from anyone, regardless of the pain he inflicts, but will sort of weasel himself out of any situation by lying and manipulating to his heart's content. Finally, we have Saint Urbain, who seems to take for himself through the guise of religion and salvation. 3 people in one level who just want the currency of the land, souls. It's the same thing you want. You just have your specific language of consumption. Yours is violence, and not everyone speaks it the same way you do. These aren't NPCs that get in your way or strictly act to fight you, or act to serve you and you only. They are your peers, similarly minded folks with radically different approaches to the same goals. What has persisted across the games, however, is Patches.
It's filled with treasure, but I'm having a little trouble getting to it myself. Go on, have a look. They're more riches than I've ever dreamed of. That's it. That bit just there. Go on, get a little closer. What's keeping you? Have a look at that treasure down in the pit. Then we'll think up a way to fish it out. Don't hold it against me, eh? Take your time starving to death. Then I'll sell every last trinket off your corpse.
A couple of years ago, I played through some of the From Software games with my wife. And ignoring that doing so was maybe one of the single best times of my entire life, she did make a remarkable comment during the Tomb of the Giants level in Dark Souls 1. This was after playing Bloodborne and Demon Souls. She just said, "A Souls game is just falling in a hole." Mind you, she was being entirely literal. It wasn't a commentary, but a straightforward observation. Although, boy howdy, does it work on many levels. What an obvious observation in hindsight. This first time, however, happens as a result of a liar. A mischievous, obvious, bald-headed liar. A liar we all love. It's easy to forget just how big of a deal the naturalistic and self-interested NPCs of these games were. It was such a shock to me to slowly figure out all of the people who surround the Nexus or Firelink Shrine were not all there to serve me and me alone. That they leave without telling me, that they will charge me exorbitant prices because of reasons specific to their own story, that they will not trust me fully or see me as important whatsoever, that they lie to me. I love Patches because he serves no purpose for my character's story. Like me to him, he is unimportant and is an opportunity.
No need to drag each other down.
His push introduces you to another NPC, Saint Urbane. Saint Urbane has been mentioned before by NPCs resting in the Nexus, but I certainly remember thinking, how real is the religion of this world before meeting him? I mean, it's so... This game is so dark and subversive and sometimes even cynical. I was just thinking, there's no way that there is truly this sort of monotheistic, pious religion that watches over everyone. True devout believer. In that sense, he is just another great example of the game's opinion on souls, or to draw out the metaphor, currency. Urbane wants nothing more than for you to bring him the demon's souls so that he may cleanse them of their evil and harness their power for pious opportunity. There's good reason to believe that Saint Urbane is somewhat of a hypocrite. Many people believe he was lured down the hole in the same way you were, with promises of shiny treasure. What kind of religious icon would possibly be so captivated by worldly items that he would trust a hyena such as Patches? In a shocking turn of events, and a betrayal to the once-upon-a-time militant atheist that was early 20s David O.Z., I am gonna come to the defense of Saint Urbane. Grossly wrong about the way the cosmology of the world works? Sure, that's true. Blatantly immoral and inconsistent from his preaching? I'm not ready to make that call yet. Patches has made it abundantly clear that he watches and assesses travelers as they approach. He is a cunning little snake, and it is not hard for me to believe that he could have lured Saint Urbane down into the hole with any number of treacherous tactics or manipulation. It's a good example of the ways in which Demon Souls forces me to always think that next level deeper about whatever the game is showing me. Because it very well could be that the intended lesson to be taken away from Saint Urbane's predicament is a sort of cynical commentary on his hypocritical wielding of religious virtue. I tend to see it as far more of a commentary on just how manipulative and evil someone like Patches is capable of being. Less about Urbane, more about Patches. I don't know, the religious commentary just seems like low-hanging fruit for From Software. But to bring it back, I think that's just another reason why Grave Robber Blige is one of my favorite characters from this game. in a world with such brazen, immoral thievery in all sorts of ways, but where that thievery is not only common but expected. Blige has found what I think might be the most honorable version, maybe. Go to the place already full of dead people, take what he can, and then offer what he finds to those who are doing the actual adventuring, at an incredibly reasonable price as well. He also clearly can't stand Patches the Hyena, calling him genuine trash in his dialogue. The grave robber taking such a moral, firm stance against the hyena is pure demon souls, and I love that. World 2-2, gameplay-wise, really is just a path. Warriors who were judged favorably by the Adjudicator would be forced to venture through this path so as to be sacrificed to the Storm King. Much like the second level of Boletaria, it asks you to straightforwardly confront many annoying enemies without much creative use of level design. I never enjoy playing through this level. That's just the truth. It tests the most base level action game skills for me, such as rolling through the laser beam attacks, or just memorizing where each of the Reaper enemies spawn so as to rid them as fast as possible. My memories of playing this level for the first time might be some of the most frustrated I ever got playing this game. And it wasn't until I felt like I could play the level blindfolded, through complete memorization, that I could actually complete it. Aesthetically, I love any moment in which I get to narrowly navigate the cliffsides, and I tend to enjoy the moments with the skeleton enemies more than I do the moments with the tunnels and the Reapers and the stairs. But after a visually striking but somewhat annoying run-through of the glowing pits before the boss, we approach the Old Hero. This boss, seemingly resurrected or made whole through the ritualistic glowing blue sludge, or the obvious gifts adorning his entire body, or something else that I'm not picking up on, emerges from the stonework blind. This boss is a great example of that early From Software narrative opacity. I've never quite been able to figure this guy out, but I love it. My usual headcanon for his story is that he was one of the few heroes to make it through the ritual path, and was basically entombed in Shadowmen valor and honor. The Shadowmen being the race of people that lived here ages ago, doing all of these rituals. It seems the white phosphorus sticky white stuff in the previous room was being harvested for some reason, probably to do with magic and, in my opinion, preserving or keeping the old hero alive in some way. And my guess is he was subjected to so much of it that it rendered him blind. But I really don't know for sure. Unscripted moment here, upon editing, I thought this room was full of, white phosphorus, goop. But weirdly, it looks pretty clear and blue from my footage. My memory of this world is like a pure white glowing liquid that you're running through. I'm having the weirdest, Mandela effect with this room, and it's driving me a bit mad. Is this why some people hate the remake? Am I getting it confused with the original? What is happening? Okay, sorry about that. But the old hero's blindness does play a role in the fight as well. Famously, if you put on the Thief's Ring, which is thematically appropriate with this world, you are offered way more freedom of movement because he can't echolocate you until you hit him. I find he's one of the most tense bosses to fight in this game. The biggest strength in his design comes from his damage, which must be respected at all times. Even with the confidence that the Thief's Ring brings you, I still am a third of his size. Flailing wildly the second I attack is a totally reasonable response if you were in his situation. The lack of real boss fight music is okay. Mainly it contributes to that feeling of, I have to approach this being with the utmost caution, and builds tension the further you go.
This fight could read as boring and one-dimensional, but I always find it pulls on some anxieties that rarely get utilized now that I'm so used to slaying these bosses in these games. Unfortunately, I think much of the anxiety that the boss brings about comes from the fact that I really, really, really do not want to play through the ritual path again if I die. And just to add a little clarity to what I was saying before, there's no traditional boss fight music, no sort of like raucous, loud, angelic choirs just like popping off in the background. Instead, there's this like very kind of, I'm not a music guy, I want to say discordant, sort of haunting singing going on in the background and some strings that absolutely is designed to match up with what I was saying about that tension and that anxiety. I mean, it's so clear if you just listen to the soundtrack itself. This boss to me is a decent Demon Souls boss, scoring a 12 in the mechanics section, 7 in presentation, and just the 1 point in the lore section. You know, admittedly, looking at this rubric, you gotta think that I'm looking long-term here, right? I'm thinking about FromSoft games as a whole, maybe not ranking them purely amongst each other in terms of Demon Souls alone. Maybe I should have made that clear in the past, but this is, to me, makes sense when compared to the series as a whole. I think the scores would be higher if we were just limiting it to Demon Souls alone. Anyway, moving on. According to the description of the Archstone, after heroes receive judgment and purification from the ritual path, they are sent for sacrifice to the Storm King. The Storm King is our first archdemon, an extremely powerful foe that has been so stocked up on souls that they exceed normal demon status and maybe even act as a sort of general of generals for the Old One's quest for endless souls. The archdemons cap off each of the worlds, so this is World 2, right? So the Storm King is the final encounter of the Shrine of Storms series of levels. I've often thought that archdemons have a sort of religious significance to those in the demon world, and that anyone can realistically become an archdemon. It seems like what makes an archdemon is some threshold of devotion. The dragon god's worshippers, the Storm King's sacrifices, Maiden Estrella's godlike status certainly fits here. To graduate into archdemonhood, it seems, you need to have made the people of your world worship and revere you in some way. You need to be a leader. The Storm King, to me, though, is an all-time From Software moment in terms of presentation. The mechanics are pretty meh if you ask me, but my god, you cannot beat the epic clash between you and this beast. I can't lie. I know the remake isn't very popular amongst some groups of people. In fact, I know that the PS5 generation of consoles isn't that popular. But this fight was worth the price of the PS5 alone. This is stellar, phenomenal stuff here. As you saw when you first enter the boss arena, your first task is to navigate through the ruins and dodge the artillery to find Storm Ruler, a sword of legend that allows you to cleave through the atmosphere and attack a beast that's stories above you. Mind-blowing attention to detail, with the way the king blocks the rain from falling through it, to the way the Storm Ruler slices through the sky in such atmospheric glory. This is such an incredible moment for me because I truly feel as if I am fighting an otherworldly deity, something worthy of the respect and sacrifice the people of the world have given it. Its cries of anguish as you connect with Storm Ruler makes the fight have that edge of immorality that we'll talk about in great detail later on. The sound design itself is phenomenal, and I just adore the way the game pulls focus, like literally the depth of field, like in cinema. And will sometimes even have like the tail of the Storm King when it's closer to you in focus, and the rest of its body blurry and out of focus, which is really such a neat design idea to give the beast impossible size to make it have that depth. The boss simultaneously surprises me with its grandeur, but also completely vindicates and contextualizes the entire path through the Shrine of Storms. No wonder this place exists. I mean, look at this thing. That being said, fighting it could be better. Although the image or the fantasy of what I'm doing is kind of unbeatable, it lacks a little bit as the fight goes on. I'll just say that. He hits hard, the terrain is somewhat finicky, and I find myself wishing there was just a little bit less like waiting around. I think less hard-hitting attacks with more frequent oppressive bombing runs would have turned this fight from a potential boring slugfest that it kind of ends up being to more like an aerial assault against a magical sword-wielding lunatic. Here's the review. One of the biggest discrepancies between mechanics and presentation that I think we will see in this game. It tests the limits of my rubric a bit because in a lot of ways I'm not ready to say that Tower Knight is a wholesale better boss than the Storm King. But that's the way the points are weighted on the rubric, so I think I gotta trust the process. So you know how I haven't uploaded a video to this channel in like 4 years? Yeah, my bad. I mean, I definitely retired. Let's be clear about that. I moved on. Doing other things. Life moves in weird ways. I'll be the first to admit it. I've always wanted to make videos about these games, though, and it seemed only right to do so with the first one. I had originally thought about doing a super long, ultra mega, 15-hour video over all of them, but I was inspired by the idea of walking through them as commentaries as we go through the game. That being said, this video has taken me quite a long time to make. The distance between right now when David OZ is speaking into this microphone and when I press the buttons on the controller to make my character do the things you are watching on screen, that distance is very long. Look, I hate to admit it, I'd love for it to all be this efficient process, but I am not a YouTuber. I have a very, very time-consuming job. So, here I am, trying to figure out why past David chose to go to Boletaria Stage 3 after completing only one of the Archdemons. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because, well, this area is maybe my favorite in the entire game, but it is difficult. I feel as if it is balanced for the end of the game. I know, of course, that this game is shorter. It's, that's not a good way to look at it. But realistically, on most of my Demon Souls playthroughs, I complete each and every archdemon and then come to Boletaria 3 and then do the final level. This is how I've always done it. So I'm kind of interested to see as I commentate over through this gameplay, like, why did I do this before taking on Dragon God, before taking on even the Man-Eaters? I have not even been to the Valley of Defilement yet. You just gotta think this had to have been one of the last levels that From Software designed for this game. And I'm just talking about its level design and geometry and enemy placement and whatnot. It by far is the most similar to what I would consider modern FromSoft design in terms of its levels, in terms of its dungeons, whatever you want to call them. It's maybe a little bit more linear than what we'll see in the future, but even looking at this section here, which just gives you the branching paths that neither are necessarily better or worse, but they provide a little bit of variety and different... Oh my god. Okay, those guys have got hands. You can't blame me. I think I thought I could kill him. I mean, I know that's what happened. I mean, this level has all of the little things that make a From Software level great. I mean, it has a lot of variety in its locations. You have these corridors that require these one-on-one engagements. You have the more open-ended area with the archers who make you think about how to properly progress forward. There are branching paths. There are hidden items. There's vendors. There's a great NPC interaction and little side quest with Yuria that we'll talk about later on. It is, I think, the most adeptly designed level in this game. I don't know if it qualifies for my favorite because when I squint my eyes and I think about Demon Souls, I don't really think about this level. So there might be like a flavor or an edge to this that is missing for me. But in terms of just how do you make a good 3D action game level, this is so great. I particularly like this section, which really, really, and there's like cool and unique ways to get places like this. But these stairs coming up here with the assassins is, I've totally lost my train of thought. I'm really interested to see if this goes back to what I said about... Surely you can get up here. There we go. Okay. Well done, Pass David. And I'm back here. I just wanted to see if I could do it. I feel like people remember less big picture level design ideas and more like the miniature stories that these levels present. So much of these levels that are considered great oftentimes have these cool interactions, or they have these particularly difficult like set pieces like this that invoke a feeling or a memory. Like, oh, I remember getting stuck on that so many times, or I remember the feeling I had when I finally made it through that gauntlet. These stairs right here absolutely have that feeling for me. I would say also the stairs at the end leading up to the boss do as well. But if I could just jump ahead a little bit, I actually think that one's a little bit too much and is one of my few criticisms of this level, is there are just too many difficult enemies on that gauntlet. It's a great opportunity for the player messages as well, which we have not talked about very much. This is, I think, when we talked about that optimistic approach to player messages, this is what I think I intended, which are these little warnings and these memories of I struggled with this and I don't want future people to struggle with this. You can imagine a good-hearted person narrowly making it through an area like this and just thinking, oh, I can't let someone else get ambushed like this again. I have to put a message down. And I think that's beautiful. I really do. I've now scrubbed through almost 45 minutes of footage of me playing through this level. Again, why in the world did I think it was a good idea to take on this level this early in the game?
However, I've made it through this area, which I think is a pretty great little gauntlet. Again, challenging different skills. It's like we talked about that in the previous level. It's not just challenging your reaction time in a straight corridor or your memory. It's a load of different types of enemies, all thematically appropriate and all kind of militaristic. It gives you an idea through these assassins about just the type of military that the royals would use when an intruder gets this close to their home. The desperation. There's all sorts of traps like this one and the one previously seen. They have different types. There's halberds, there's bows, there's knights with swords, there's mages. They throw stuff. It's hard. This level is long, it's difficult, but it is good, let me tell you. I do remember this part because I remember thinking, I should not be alive. I've made it this far. I'm going to run in there. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to open this gate, which acts as a shortcut. And then I'm probably going to instantly die. Look at me go. But one thing I do remember is that you save Ostrava here, and he emerges kind of fearfully with a bunch of people chasing after him. And I thought, well, I got to defend my guy Ostrava. He's helped us so much. I have never unlocked this door and then, spoiler alert, instantly died after. And the whole time I was thinking, and look at my health there, the whole time I was thinking is, oh no, are they going to kill him? I get so nervous about this because I'm like, I'm so far into this playthrough. I'm recording this for this video. Oh my gosh, I have to run as fast as I can to get back to Ostrava. I have to save Ostrava. I mean, I don't have a choice in the matter. So now I'm thinking to myself, okay, you can't outrun Souls dogs. If you don't know that, you need to learn. So we got to get rid of those guys first. But you can tell I'm like a little bit rushed, a little bit panicky. I like to think that one of the core tenets that applies to all of these From Software games is that, if you try and rush through some of these levels, you will oftentimes waste more time than if you just methodically went through and killed them anyway. But this proved to not be the case here, as I receive the 2-hit wombo combo that instantly kills me and sends me back to the lobby. After dying literally 2 more times, let's be honest, I give up on my boy Ostrava and turn around from the Archstone to go visit an interesting NPC. We received an old Iron Key earlier in the game, and we are now here to go break someone out of prison. Who that is Bior of the Twin Fangs fame.
Who goes there? You killed that blooded sluggard for me. I'm called Bior, the Elder of the Twin Fangs of Boletaria. I thank you. You deserve a handsome reward. Only I have none. Go on ahead. I shall sleep a while.
Bior of the Twin Fangs is one half of the duo that served as valiant knights for King Allant. We know that the other half, Valorfax, was the one who braved the fog and created the fissure to the outside world that we were able to travel through. Valorfax is nowhere to be found, but Bior was obviously incarcerated. Now, I like these two a lot, their stories, and I think they make clear something I mentioned all the way at the beginning of this video, that this game is especially interested in the idea of knights and dragons in high fantasy, but that it has a specific sort of bone to pick with that idea. Bior is a completely misguided but honorable man. He seems washed up, out of place, and is literally falling asleep at the wheel of his life. He mentions that he was brought down and imprisoned by a mighty knight. I wonder if we will learn anything more about that.
You saved my life. This is the third time. I am truly indebted to you. This is all I have. But please accept it. Now I must go. My father, the king, awaits me.
Ostrava is alive. Hooray. Now, the astute and maybe less empathetic of you might be recognizing now that Ostrava is often turning tail and running away. We have saved his butt quite a few times and basically completely opened up the way for his advancement through Boletaria to this point. Not to beat a dead Dregling here, but he is once again another example of a traditional knight who, on the surface, seems heroic and brave, who has a completely tarnished self under all of that golden armor. And that armor, by the way, tells us something of Ostrava's journey. It's of Latrian origin. But we know, because Ostrava says that he's the son of the king of the Boletaria, that he is not originally from Latria. I've always thought that maybe the king, shipped off Austria. Okay, shipped off God. I've always thought that maybe the king shipped off Ostrava to Latria for something like military school or college. He maybe even did so in an attempt to distance himself from family while he instigates the second scourge of demons. But again, I'm not sure. This game does a good job, of blurring the lines between a headcanon and actual canon, partly because its lore and storytelling is so up for interpretation. I am certain, however, that Ostrava received a somewhat privileged adolescence, that he dons the weapons and armor in an attempt to shield some harsh realities about himself and his situation. Ostrava is not a hero, at least not yet, but he is certainly not a villain. He is a lost man in a suit of armor. Again, this area of the level is the only thing that kind of prevents it from being maybe an all-time Soulsborne stage for me. There are just too many difficult enemies, and I find that these spear plus shield wielding Red Eye Knights are just far too tedious to fight. So if they would have put one or two of these guys up on this stairs instead of this frankly annoying gauntlet, I think this stage would go down as one of the best ever. That mighty knight that Bior was talking about, the Penetrator is his name. And clearly, penetrating is his game. I can't believe I said that. Look, the footage here isn't going to be great. I'm just going to be honest. I was following the Bior questline. I was a little bit underleveled. And admittedly, I looked to find the footage from my other playthrough that we talked about previously in this video, and I couldn't find that either. So this is what you get. You're going to notice that the Penetrator and Bior eventually get to a point where it looks like they kind of have their own beef to work out. I think there's quite a story happening here. But eventually you'll see I just kind of watch. That being said, I have fought this boss 4 billion times across the original game and the remake, so I can say for sure that this, much like the level before, is the closest we've gotten to modern FromSoft boss design. He doesn't have a lot of attacks, but he did for the time, but they hit hard and are somewhat predictable and telegraphed. It's a complete test of reactions at this point, right? It's just combat ability. And thus, it kind of makes it a little bit hard to talk about in great detail. I'd say he suffers a bit from the sheer fact that he is nowadays far too easy. If there is no shtick, no puzzle to be solved, if this boss truly is just a fight, then Demon Souls can't help the fact that I have fought any number of Bloodborne or Elden Ring bosses, that of which look like veritable ballerinas compared to old Metas here. Yeah, we know Penetrator's true identity, but we'll get there eventually. Penetrator has a great boss introduction, good music, good art, but because of the simplicity, it ends up looking a bit average in the grand scheme of From Software boss design. Definitely above average in terms of Demon Souls, though. Still, though, we've had a pretty good stretch of bosses here. We now progress back to the Stonefang Tunnels for the second level of this Archstone's world. This is my least favorite stage in the game, and it's funny, despite a neat patches interaction, a decent vendor, and some interesting armor and weapons along the way, you could basically skip the entirety of this level by just turning right at the entrance and doing the platforming challenge all the way down to the boss fog. Obviously, I didn't do that for this video. I wanted to be thorough in my exploration. However, in any other stage, I think I would be really appreciative of this fact, right? It's almost like a faster run back. Maybe normally you would unlock some sort of door to unlock it. But here it's just kind of there. And it's a really interesting dynamic when you consider the rest of this level that if you turn left, you have the entirety of the stage with this complex tunnel system and the outer area with all of the sort of cliffside scaffolding. And then if you turn right, you get that sort of classic From Software falling down, but in a strategic way, platforming challenge. And then it's just straight to the boss fight. I don't hate this on its own. Part of the reason why I don't like it so much is that the left side of the area, to me, is just an absolute slog to navigate. Part of it, I'm sure, has to do with these bear bug enemies, the giant ones that block the caverns. You know, fighting them is such a pain, and it is not a test of anything but your patience, essentially. I find myself still getting lost in this area to this day, despite using those glowy, you know what I'm talking about, things that are on the floor here. You know, on the one hand, I can appreciate how interconnected this level is, how it chooses to have that sort of T branch at the beginning and still finds a way to connect itself at the end. I think that's neat, right? It's just enemy placement, enemy diversity, this platforming section, getting lost in those tunnels. Geez, where do I stop? The lack of visibility in the level, all of it kind of contributes to a truly kind of unenjoyable session. You know, if you've played these games before, you know they're already filled with tension and gameplay friction and sort of an uncomfortable feeling. And that needle being shifted even a little bit toward being too uncomfortable is sometimes too much. And there's a tendency when presented with that kind of thing to just run through the level or run past enemies or not immerse yourself as much. And I often do that in this stage. I mean, almost regularly now on my Demon Souls playthroughs. And again, it's not helped by the fact that the exit or the route to the boss fog is literally presented to you at the start of the level. It's just kind of a weird mixture of, I don't want to play this, and, oh, look, a back door to the end of the level.
The Flamelurker is one of the bosses that I do not think translated over to the remake as well as other bosses, partially because it relies so much on its intimidating artistic design and its aggression. Now that we've seen so many aggressive bosses, and now that the boss can be seen in such high detail, I think it loses some of that mystery, some of that panic. See, the Flamelurker is meant to invoke that sense of panic in the player, giving them no time to heal or think about their next option. Again, it suffers as a result of this boss seeming borderline pedestrian compared to the absolute boss fight arms race that has occurred over the last 10 years. I tend to like this boss, however. Not love it, but I like it. I appreciate the AoE fire that's left over from each of his attacks, ensuring that you can't just only dodge the attacks and then immediately punish. I like his sound design. I like the music that plays. I like the way he traverses the arena toward you like an angry gorilla. I like the way his audio peaks in the remake and when he like slams onto the ground like that. What I don't like, however, is his AI. He frequently gets very confused and will often like jump back and forth like that or around in a circle. It's far too easy to create a lot of distance between yourself and him, and you could usually just heal through any mistake that you make by just creating that distance. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but something like a slower Estus-style healing system, or maybe even life gems, would fit this boss a lot better. The power of the healing grass is just too much, I think, for a boss like this that does this kind of chip damage. You know, the fight is a little bit worse than the Penetrator, but somewhat similar in approach in terms of it just being a test of mechanics, I suppose. It's a straightforward fight. It's just a beast-type enemy. I appreciate the pugilistic design. I know that it ties into the great Big M in some way, who had the hands of God, which can be found outside the boss arena. I'm not certain about the lore, and the game doesn't make a huge effort at demonstrating its importance, so it's going to score pretty poorly in that department. Ultimately, if it doesn't have that Demon Souls weirdness or shtick or puzzle element, it is just a Souls boss, and Demon Souls hasn't quite perfected that. Here's the score. The Dragon God comes shortly after Flamelurker and acts as our second archdemon. Look, this fight gets a lot of criticism over the years, and I am here to say, definitively, that the criticism, it's entirely deserved. Even through Elden Ring, FromSoft has flirted with stealth mechanics from afar. Sekiro did it well, but that is the exception rather than the rule. It has never been super easy to judge sightlines, enemy rotations, or even your own character's sound or visibility to other NPCs. In the same way that the platforming challenges we've talked about are the video game engine equivalent of fitting a square peg into a concrete wall, so too are the stealth mechanics on display for the Dragon God fight. This imposing force that you've seen from the intro cinematic to talked about in item descriptions to, you know, the marketing material of the game. This is the dragon from Demon Souls. You are confronted with a test of your patience, navigating between the pillars of the level geometry, one after another, until you get to these ballista that are on opposite ends of the level. The main skill being tested here, obviously, is your ability to judge where the Dragon God is looking and where they are not. I had my wife play through this one as we were going through the games together, and while there's no footage that exists of this moment, it is really interesting. This was by far the most frustrated she ever got playing these games. I mean, she fought Father Gascoigne, she tried ONS, like she tried a lot of these bosses, right? And she never got like truly angry or frustrated. She wanted to quit the game after this one. Here's the thing, I can do it now. It's not that bad anymore. But the first time experiencing Dragon God is a nightmare of unclear expectations from the video game. And then once you do figure it out, you have to then navigate what the game is asking you to do.
it becomes a repetitive slog of testing the game's tolerance for what it is you're allowed to do and what you're not. In a game that relies so heavily on telegraphed attacks and immersive world design that, kind of tests your ability to think, if I were in this situation, what would I do? I think the Dragon God ultimately just really fails in this department. It's mechanical, it's an amusement park, and I think the rides at this amusement park are a little bit busted. I appreciate the game's visuals. I think the remake looks great. I appreciate the enormity of the force you are fighting. And I do genuinely appreciate them trying to do something different with this fight. I don't need to fight the dragon head on. I'm going to do that plenty over the next couple of games. But I would like there to be a way of interacting with this fight that doesn't feel so mechanical. I do love the moment here, though, when the Dragon God rests, defeated, his chin literally down. And, I didn't show much of it, but I did skirvirs or servers or whatever his quest regarding the Dragon Bone Sword, which I'm using here. I was crafted in order to defeat dragons and literally be able to crush their bones. And the sort of poetics of fulfilling that process and then crushing the dragon god beneath the sword is meaningful to me. I really like that part. I wonder at times if the boss could have been less complicated, maybe even a pure test of just puzzle or exploration instead of the stealth mechanics ending with that moment, if people would think about the boss differently. I'm not really sure much about the lore. What I can gather from the game is that the mines were created around that dragon in some way, that it was chained down with those magic ballista there, kind of as like a security protocol against the dragon god. I'm not sure how the dragon god from the beginning of the game, the secret intro, if you beat the Vanguard demon, I'm not sure how that dragon god relates to this whole story. I get the feeling that it's probably like a fissure in time of some sort. Maybe you're transported into a new world or an alternate dimension, but ultimately I never have really understood that. This boss will go down as one of the lower tier From Software bosses, I think. Again, you can really respect the devotion to changing it up, to challenging the player in different ways. It just rings a little hollow for me, even in the presentation department. Anyway, here's the score.
Speaking of powerful forces that are being held captive, Latria travels back to Boletaria to meet a new character, a character that is going to change her perspective on the world a little bit, and also help her understand her own role as a sorcerer just a little bit better. Notice how I am... By the way, this area of the map is just so beautiful. And many of you know that there's a secret little area over there that was included in the remake. Go watch that incredible video from VatiVidya about uncovering it whenever you get a chance. Blue Point always hides in these little secret areas. This is, I think, one of the best parts of Demon's Souls by far. And one of the things that kind of separated it as such an incredible moment in video games and firmly solidified From Software as being, well, built different compared to other video game developers at the time. This hidden area asks you to don the Fat Official's costume. You can tell that this enemy, which is normally hostile, is no longer hostile and let down those stairs for us. I give him the introduction that he deserves. I eliminate the enemy, and I'm met with Yuria the Witch.
What do you want with me? Have you brutes no mercy? Do as you wish. There are no secrets here. Only a tired, emaciated frame. Do as you wish. There are no secrets here.
Yuria presents a somewhat cautionary tale of what could happen to Latria. If you remember from 3 hours ago, when we established that Latria came to Boletaria in search of great power through the soul arts or sorcery, so too did Yuria. Yuria coming here was incarcerated by executioner Meralda. Meralda put her in this prison, a place for special cases, in which the key to it was covered in dried blood, which tells us something about the way the fat officials in Boletaria treated Yuria. She's been crushed, essentially, broken down, insecure. She's afraid to teach you soul arts at this point for fear of such a corrupting force also getting to you and ruining your life like it happened to her. And her kind of like marriage and then divorce from the soul arts and then her slow reclamation of its importance and understanding it in a new way makes her one of the best characters in the story by far. She explains her witchcraft and how it's different than Sage Frake likes to use it. And she does it with such caution. Please be aware of this, right? It's you're calling upon human emotions. It's just a dark, dependent thing that you're wanting to do. However, she still teaches it to you because somewhere deep inside, I think she still believes in the soul arts and she believes in you. Absolutely, she does. It's beautiful because Demon Souls is a game about people being corrupted by all sorts of things, power, currency, even just demons, right? Yuria is the first time maybe that we're confronted with a character who was corrupted and now isn't, or is at the very least in the process of healing. Very rarely in these games do you see someone coming out of the despondency, coming out of the despair. Do you see somebody healing from the wounds of these games? And Yuria is doing that. And in that sense, she's an incredibly interesting and motivating character for me every time I play. She brings me joy. She brings me optimism and warmth. I always go out of my way, even on pure melee builds, to go and save Yuria. It just feels like the right thing to do. I tend to try and avoid just commenting over and over again on how Demon Souls is some progenitor for the rest of the FromSoft games. It is just a bit of low-hanging fruit, I guess, as it really does devalue a lot of what Demon Souls does uniquely. Much of the experience of playing Demon Souls was the first to do it. That's true. I will be cutting through similar enemies and areas all the way through Elden Ring. But there's a lot in these games, in this game, that you won't see again. A lot of design decisions and philosophies that get abandoned for, in the most uncharitable reading, more straightforward action game tests of reflex and skill. Upper Latria, or Latria Stage 2-2, is not only a homecoming for Latria, noble graduate of the School of Jormungandr in Latria, but is also a homecoming for anyone who has played, well, I was going to say Bloodborne, but really any From Software game. The unknown, eldritch horror that these games focus so heavily on, it's on full display here. Broadly speaking, this is the case for all of the stages of Latria, but it is so apparent here when you consider the fact that you are exploring a realm that is clearly doing some sort of experimentation on the prisoners from the first stage. Exploring this area will reveal a mass of bodies and viscera, suspended by chains that you have to take down in order to progress. I mean, even this set piece specifically should seem familiar to some of you. I'm not certain, but it seems as if the experimentation here had something to do with developing some sort of connection or power capable of creating or communicating with demons, maybe even trying to create a demon of their own. It is so ramshackle, hanging on by literal threads, that it creates this impeccable atmosphere of existing in this terrible limbo between worlds, between humanity and demonhood. And this is made doubly interesting when you consider the level itself is separated into 2 different levels, or planes. This duality is made present throughout so much of the level also. There are 2 vertical levels, 2 towers that hold up the brain, and obviously 2 foes that await us at the top of the ivory tower. I'm so impressed by how great the level design here is, making this level feel absolutely huge, but in reality maintain a pretty digestible mental map for the player to develop as they explore through it. Nothing will ever beat the feeling of taking the elevator down and seeing all of the cast-off prisoners, both dead and made to be alive through some horrible processing of their bodies. I know just enough to make this world horrifying, but not nearly enough for it all to be explained and turned into a science fair exhibit. When we do look back and make wider comparisons across the series, it's hard for me to even imagine how someone didn't see the creativity on display here. Now, I understand I am a D1 From Software lover, but even the president of Sony himself made it pretty clear before this game came out that he thought it was an abject disaster. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll look it up. They shipped this game thinking it was a waste of their money. Now, I like this level a lot, obviously. I think it is in the running for the best in the game. A great NPC like Yurt the Silent Chief, who acts as a clear evildoer, occupies the more narrative elements of this map. The great interconnectedness and the multiple elevators and circular design to the level makes it super satisfying when you loop back in on the Archstone from the beginning. This is where I have to really sit here and accept the fact, though, that there are 10 billion things in this game and in this level, really, that I want to talk about. But ultimately, I will not be able to talk about all of them. So let's talk about maybe the hardest boss in the game. The Man-Eaters, or as my wife likes to say, the flying monkeys from Wicked, are straight up the most rage-inducing, inconsistent, incomprehensible parts of this game. But I don't know, I kind of like them. Like the old Hero's Damage, fighting the Man-Eaters makes me feel something, man. It doesn't make me feel good, but boy do I feel something. The main culprit here for negativity is the AI. Once again, it's just an absolute crapshoot on if you are going to get a consistent experience from these guys. Fighting them never feels right. It always feels like I'm going to fisticuffs with a malfunctioning animatronic at Disneyland. I am frequently surprised at their decision-making. And a lot of the times I die because of some absolutely insane movement tech that catches me completely off guard. Honestly, most of the time I die because I get knocked off the platform. I am absolutely not defying gravity in this boss fight. But ignoring those frustrating parts, I do think the boss is balanced well, like the bosses themselves. If it weren't for its difficulty with the platform, I think this would actually be a pretty decent duo fight that has great health and damage balancing. Far better, actually, than the balancing of the gargoyles we will see in the next game. In that sense, I think this is a decent fight mechanically that gets shrouded by an absolutely baffling decision to have you fight on such unfair footing. But the reveal of the second Man-Eater is pretty iconic, and obviously they do this again like we mentioned just one game later. But the fight is strange because it is difficult, it is intense, it does the beautiful video game thing where you think, there's just no way someone could do this, and then you end up overcoming a once impossible feat. I love these games for a lot of reasons, but I do love these games because they are hard, just straightforward, difficult. I like it. But unfortunately, I think they create a difficulty too arbitrarily here, too frustratingly. Of all the sort of straightforward action game boss fights of this game, your penetrators and flamelurkers, this fight dials up the intensity higher than each and every other similar fight in the game. Ultimately, I think they just pushed the needle a little bit too far. They hadn't quite figured out how to layer in difficulty through boss complexity, and thus just made it hard through non-interesting mechanics such as doubling the boss and restricting player movement. Man-Eaters is our reminder that FromSoft is still figuring it out in this game.
There's a rumor that the Silent Chief Yurt has infiltrated Boletaria. Yurt's a mercenary. He'd kill his own kin for the right price. Now, I'm not a saint, but compared to Yurt, I'm as saintly as they come. So, I implore you to stay away from Yurt, the assassin in black.
I am indebted to you for your help in Latria. Without it, I would not have made it back. Now, I can go on with my work. And for that, thank you. What is it? I have no business with you. Not yet. Do not be concerned. Life is hardly as precious as one might think. Mephistopheles was right about you.
I guess the only reason I'm showing you the saga of Yurt, the Silent Chief, the assassin, is to just demonstrate, I mean, in Demon Souls, man, there are levels to the evil on display in this game. Patches warning you about this guy tells you everything you need to know about Yurt. The voice actor does a pretty good job, too. You can kind of hear it in his voice, right? I'm reminded of the sort of memes of, like, a small fish being hunted by a medium fish, being hunted by an even larger fish. And I think that's how, in a lot of ways, evil works in this game.
When you think you've found the bottom, there's still a whole nother section to go. Ascending the stairs after the Man-Eater fight will lead us to the Old Monk, the third archdemon in our quest to awaken the Old One. We aren't the only ones who want to figure out more about the Old One. This shriveled up old man that we're about to sort of fight, adorned in a possessed golden cloak, is the one behind the experimentation and evil happening in Latria. What was once a matriarchy ruled over by the Queen of Latria is now a demon-possessed nightmare because of this guy and his clothes. So yes, you fight an NPC here or a real player. Those familiar with the game will know that this is a somewhat common thing in these games, but ultimately, this boss is incredibly difficult to rate in terms of our rubric because it relies so much on who you get to fight. That being said, here we fight the NPC version, and so that is what I will be judging going forward, with the caveat that yes, you can play any varying range of skill level in your opponent if it's an online player. Yeah, this fight's going to be over pretty quickly. Look, it's hard to say. I'm glad that From Software put in the opportunity for the NPC fight to exist if no one is around to play it. That's just a good thing to do in terms of games preservation. But as you can see, despite some sloppy play from me here, he just doesn't stand a chance. And really what it means is that where this boss is kind of a cool moment in terms of lore, this phantom is obviously being controlled by the old man. So there's actually like kind of layers to the previous level, and like we talked about layers with the morality, there's kind of layers to this, right? The phantom, the boss, is being controlled by the man is being controlled by the cloth, and maybe the cloth is being controlled by the demons. And again, this sort of control or this idea of having a proxy or someone in place has so much thematic significance to this game. When you think about the last boss, when you think about the Fool's Idol, and when you think about the body and the soul in the way that it's talked about in this game. So it actually does a really, really good job in connecting the larger themes and ideas of this game, as well as just being cool on a straightforward lore perspective. But the fight itself is almost impossible to rank, and what that means, I think, is that it's going to get a pretty bad score. So
The old monk, unfortunately, ends up being a bit of a disappointment. And even when you consider that the lore is neat and that it has this thematic significance, the fact still remains that we're not fighting the old monk himself. And really what we end up fighting is just a little bit too easy. So here's our ranking. In another bizarre decision that I'm retroactively trying to figure out, that I myself, David OZ, made, I am entering into the last stage of Boletaria here. I think I have a theory for why I want to do this. I had some footage of me going into the Valley of Defilement and kind of struggling, which I shouldn't at this point, right? The Valley of Defilement should be, the first stage should be very easy for me at this point. But I was struggling because of my weapon. And, you know, this giant, unwieldy sword, if you want to call it, that I'm using right here, the Dragon Bone Smasher, doesn't really work very well in this game because, as I've mentioned before, if your sword hits a wall, say goodbye to your attack. Although, of course, that doesn't apply to the enemies. So, wearing a witch hat here, I've decided to make some progress through this stage, and I think I know why. Looking at these enemies, you could tell that I'm cheesing the AI a little bit. I'm walking forward to try and aggro one at a time because I really like this fight. I think this is a really cool moment, and I think it's a cool moment for two reasons. I think it's a good introduction into the level, but obviously, I also think it's cool because the more you learn about these enemies here, the more you realize they're very significant. These are black phantoms representing three of the different bosses of Boletaria to this point. These are the knight versions of the real life examples of those people. Real life, obviously, within the fiction of the game, but here we're fighting Metas, Knight of the Lance, who represents the Penetrator. This is pre-demon invasion versions of these enemies, I suppose. But we'll go on to fight Alfred, who has the Tower Knight shield, obviously representing the Tower Knight, and then Longbow Ulan, who was known for having legions of soldiers protecting her and fighting with her at all times, making her the Phalanx. I really like this fight. I actually think, weirdly, the two here end up being a pretty cool duo fight, which I think informed some of the duo fights later on. But, you know, it does a good job of, as much as I try to get them separated, you actually have to use the level geometry really cleverly here and get creative about how you take on these two enemies. They're hard, but I actually really, really like this fight between these two. I think it's a good one. After defeating those enemies, you go through a gauntlet of kind of a, hey, remember this of Boletaria. You get a dragon swooping down. You have to fight blue and red-eye knights. You fight some fat officials. There's some decent level design here, but it's very, very linear. And as you progress through the level, you're met with a really cool moment, which is, you know, we've talked so much about this game, about Ostrava and Bior, and this idea of the picture of a knight versus maybe the real deal, or maybe what we see in Ostrava or what we see in Bior. This idea that the game wields the armor of a knight, of a high fantasy, but has much more hidden underneath it. And we get this cool dichotomy because we see Bior saying, "Leave the dragon to me," right? And he's here just like kind of struggling to fight this dragon in this really futile way, not asking for help, but doing the very, very obvious knight in shining armor activity. He's literally fighting a dragon in golden armor on the steps of the castle. "Leave it to me," he says. Okay, I will. But of course, where it becomes brilliant is where you walk in and you see Ostrava sitting on the stairs, right before the throne room, despondent.
Oh, it's you, is it? My father is up above. Or something like him anyway. A demon in his shape. I began this quest to ask my father his reasons. To drag him back to the path of righteousness. But it seems it was all in vain. Please, kill my father. In his depraved state, he could only bring peril to these lands. His key... Inside the mausoleum lies Father's sword, the Demon Brand, twin of Soul Brand. Use it to bring an end to his madness.
I can't imagine it's intentional, but the fact that the dragon is just outside repeatedly breathing its fire on Bior while he sits there and talks about his father and his crushed dreams and his expectations of himself falling apart. It's just kind of a beautiful poetry. Oh my god. Why did that kill me instantly? That's funny. I talked to Ostrava so I could get the mausoleum key and lead me to Old King Doran, a legendary hero who protects Demon Brand, a sword that is capable of doing tremendous damage to evildoers in Boletaria and its surrounding lands. It's a really cool sword also. I mean, that's why else wouldn't you want it? But if you've played this game, you know defeating him is incredibly difficult. He is one of the tankiest and most difficult hard-hitting enemies in all of these games, period. Were he a regular health bar boss, he'd probably be the hardest in the game. So we're not going to fight him. Look, I have been no enemy to cheese. I am okay with doing what I have to do in terms of these games. And sometimes all you need is a little bit of a push. Cast your judgment. I have no regrets. Now, myself and my new sword are heading to the final set of levels in this game, the Valley of Defilement. A just disgusting, brutally sad and kind of depressing series of levels that, look, there's a reason I always save it for last in my playthroughs. I definitely want to get through this area quickly. When you start thinking about the levels in this game, you realize that it's actually doing something that a lot of these From Software games do, and specifically that the magic system does. So in almost all of the action RPG From Software games, right, you have this choice between intelligence and faith, right? And they're supposed to represent this more maybe secular side of things and then this more devout religious side of things. And we know that both of those result in magic. And we know that, like the talisman from earlier, that the old one can both be explained as a demon, also as capital G God. So this idea that these two things, science and religion, are two sides of the same coin is really important to these games. And I think the world design reflects that as well through the Archstones. So, for example, if you think about like the Stonefang Tunnels, or you think about the Tower of Latria, those are two worlds in which are really, really focused on industry, productivity. They're interested in the human side of things, experimentation, science, the development of these minerals and ores, things like that. This is where the industrialists are. Then if you think about something like the Shrine of Storms, you realize, like, okay, so these were these deeply spiritual and devout people that were doing sacrifices, for example. So in that sense, there's kind of two more, let's call intelligence-based worlds and two faith-based worlds.
And the Valley of Defilement absolutely contends and qualifies for the faith-based world category. I like this first realm a lot better than World 5.2, partly because it has some really great level design that, again, kind of you'll see later on in the series with Blighttown or the Gutter. It also has a lot of interesting set pieces. By this point, you should know that I really love these like parts of the stage that are kind of different than the other ones, that have these unique ideas or these complex problems that, you know, you remember above the level as a whole. You know, I'm reminded of the bridge in which you cross it and the enemies come in front of you and then the enemies ambush you from behind. The haunted house level design that this series is so popular for is really on display here. And it puts you in a lot of scary predicaments, like when you go down the stairs into the plague rats. And once you do that, you're then like, oh, I have to go back to the vendor who sold the cure for plague. But she has her own storytelling and her own motives, and creates a really uncomfortable kind of feeling for the rest of the level.
Won't you please buy something? My poor child is hungry. You deserve to die. So let me give you some advice. This place buzzes with pastes fattened on a diet of souls. You could do worse than keep some lotuses for protection. The price of survival can never be too high, can it? How many years has it been since that witch Ostrava came to this valley with that squid-headed knight? Those ridiculous white robes of hers. I swear I caught her glaring at my son in disgust. Yes, it's true. She's as nasty as they come. And she's a demon to boot. Not that it surprises me.
We will learn much more about Maiden Ostrava later on in this world. This is another great example of just a memorable little set piece and challenge. I think this area is balanced really well in terms of its tension, in terms of the places that it gives you in times to rest. There's some clever shortcuts you can use by just falling between the planks. There's a lot more verticality to this level than you may seem, and it can actually be shortened quite a bit if you just explore and get creative about moving around. Dare I say, the more I write about it, the more I think about it, and the more I watch myself play through it, I'm realizing this might actually be kind of underrated. Maybe there are parts to this I didn't consider. There's a lot of really creative stuff happening in this level that the more I think about it, the more I'm like, oh, I remember this part, or I have this committed to memory. And in a lot of ways, to me, that's the marker of a good level. The problem is, of course, that it's depressing, and the boss at the end of this stage is nothing to write home about. Why do they say that? My biggest issue with the Leechmonger is it's just way too difficult. It's one of the hardest bosses in the game, and it just keeps you on your toes in a way that other bosses in this game really don't. I probably had to fight this boss upwards to 30 times. I mean, by far the most I had to fight any boss in this game to this point. There was a time when I was recording this, you know, I'd put so much work into it. I had done so much research. I had written some books. Read some books, not written some books, and I thought, I'm going to have to give up on this video because I can't beat the Leechmonger. And ultimately, you know, I decided through sheer power and force of will that, you know, I definitely can if I just try hard enough. And I'm happy to say that ultimately after, you know, 8 or 9 hours, I did beat them. I'm just kidding. Yeah, this is definitely one of the easier bosses in the game. It's made way easier when you are doing it last and you're holding Demon Brant and you have sorceries like that. This boss is a bit of a joke. Honestly, I die more to falling off of the wooden planks before I actually make it to the boss. It is really, really, really disgusting. I specifically hate leeches, like just as a concept in the world. I cannot believe those things actually exist. So I have no problem cheesing this boss, putting it away as fast as I possibly can with that spell. No part of me wants to interact with this boss more than I have to. Call me, this just feels like a personal bias, I guess, but I do not mess with the Leechmonger at all. I don't think it's the worst boss in the game, but yuck. Where I think the first level of the Valley of Defilement walks a great line between interesting and fun to play, but also vile and disgusting, putrid level design, right? I don't think we can say that about the second stage. Unfortunately, this poison swamp swings the needle too far in the kind of awkward or unwieldy direction, making this a literal, figurative, whatever you want to call it, slog to play through. I mean, the first problem is the movement. The stage is huge, and it oftentimes has you kind of methodically going from island to island like this through a poison swamp. You know, you should be so totally flush with healing grass at this point, and so much of it is just powering through the damage over time. And then it gets even worse when you have to actually fight invasions like this. You know, this is Man-Eater Mildred's kind of first appearance in these games, and it is just absolutely unfun to play. I am all for, developing friction and putting the player in uncomfortable positions to create a feeling. But here, unfortunately, I think that the world design does that enough. I don't think we also have to do it to our player. You'll see I switched back to the Dragon Bone Smasher here because it is kind of undefeated against NPC-type fights. The stagger damage is just unbeatable. Rushing through this level isn't exactly an option either because there are so many enemies put into this one stage. And the way they're placed prevents you from making any meaningful progress without methodically slashing through, hundreds of these slugs or the ambushes from the swamp men. I don't know what to call them. Here you could tell I've made it all the way up to this very just horrible looking mass of slugs. And for those of you who are familiar with the game, know what I'm trying to do here. But ultimately, this is a bit of a hidden area. Okay. Whoops. Yep, as you can imagine, I was here to get the large Sword of Moonlight. It's just a very cool sword that makes an appearance in all of these games, and I always go out of my way to try and get it. This time was a little bit more difficult. Look at how far Alethea has grown here. Her witch hat. She has understood the soul arts in a new, profound way since this adventure started. And this image right here, I know it's corny, but it's kind of amazing. She's wielding both a weapon of faith, but also the witch hat, her mastery of sorceries. She looks awesome. Ultimately, there's no amount of jewelry that can help with mobility or shortcuts that can be brought back to the bonfire, the Archstone. They can really help the fact that this stage just has far too many enemies placed in front of you, oppressive enemies that really, really make this level miserable to play through. I am all for creating a feeling via gameplay. Again, Demon Souls is trying to figure out the needle, right? What is too far in any direction? And upon playing through this stage and dying over and over again, when it's the last stage I'm playing, I never come out of this level feeling accomplished or like I've overcome something. I breathe a sigh of relief and I'm ready to move on, but more in a way that's like, I never want to do that again, or I gotta get rid of that memory as fast as possible. Never in terms of a productive struggle. So, as always, save this one for the last, and I still struggle. And even the boss doesn't exactly thrill me. It's funny, I don't necessarily hate the Leechmonger fight. Well, I do because it's leeches, and I don't necessarily hate the Dirty Colossus fight. But when I think about this game, they run together in my memory so easily. It's really kind of fascinating that both fights in a game that's clearly so dedicated to varying up the... oh, wow. Okay. If I just go for it, I guess. That clearly wants to vary up the boss design. Both fights are in this kind of pestilent area They're around the same size. They stand and flail their arms, and they throw things at you. And ultimately, I think it's just too samey for a stage that already is wearing the player down with sameness and vile nastiness. I think one or the other would have been fine. But, I mean, just being honest, it's really, really great that the Archstone boss, the Archdemon, is so unique and interesting, because there's a chance here that this is the worst stretch of bosses that we've played so far. The level design is cool here. The aesthetics are cool. I like that he basically has a machine gun, right? But ultimately, this is far too similar to the Leechmonger in its design. It's wearing thin at this point, and it's a little bit too easy. Very, very sensitive to fire damage, obviously, as you saw at the beginning. This boss is considered, like, I have no other way to say it other than it's just incredibly forgettable for me. What is unforgettable, however, for anybody who's played this game, is our Archdemon, Maiden Ostrava.
Go forth, Galvin. May you be unharmed.
Leave us, Slayer of Demons. This is a sanctuary for the lost and wretched. There is nothing here for you to pillage or plunder. Please, leave quietly.
Having seen and heard about the wretched abomination that the Valley of Defilement has become, good-natured Maiden Ostrava went on a religious expedition with her knight in shining armor, Garl Vinland. Sounds heroic, right? This place that is the casting ground for the criminals and unwanted of Boletaria is being visited by this holy savior. It is said in the lore, and through hearsay of other NPCs, that Maiden Ostrava was so concerned, so shaken by the circumstances persisting in the valley, that she turned to the demons in order to harness enough power to help the sick and defiled. It is the beautiful final capstone of the ever-persisting battle between faith and intelligence in this game, between God and the demons, and how the power presented by these forces that humans have just given proper nouns to, that power can be used for anything, good or bad. So why then must we kill her? Well, because she is an archdemon, and we are the slayer of demons. She has accepted the demon's help and carries a demon's soul, and we're here to claim it. But she's worshipped. One of the reasons this fight is so great is that upon walking in, where we are usually met with some monstrosity, some boss fight, we are met with those that just tortured us now, completely devoted to worshipping this woman. This fight is famous because it instantly casts judgment on the player, forcing them to question everything they've been doing so far. These enemies are completely on the defensive, made simply incredible by the fact that Garl Vinland will only attack you if you attack him or Ostrava. It's such a simple touch, but it forces you to be the aggressor, solidifying the questionable morals that are already made so obvious through the music, dialogue, and presentation of the fight. Looking deeper, though, you do have to question whether or not Ostrava is as noble as she says she is. I am going to choose to take the game's presentation of her at face value here. She is surrounded by viscera, laying in a pool of those she wishes to save. What I always come away from this fight thinking is less that I'm destroying some sort of angelic being in this act of evil from my part, and more that I'm putting down a lost animal. Garl Vinland and Maiden Estrella are so lost in the gore of their own decisions that they have lost sight of what they originally set out to do. Regardless, it's up to you to decide how to feel about killing these two. That's Demon Souls, baby. And that's just beautiful. The fight allows you to take this on in a couple of different ways, but I usually just opt to fight Garl one-on-one. In the spirit of this game, we are face down with another heroic knight, standing sentinel over a seemingly helpless princess. Of course, we know he is tarnished as well. I've never had a hard time taking down Garl. I mean, like, emotionally or, like, morally. He's actually easy to fight, especially if you know your parries. But, you know, his insistence on Estrella's purity in the face of overwhelming reality surrounding him makes me realize just that his language of manipulation and self-righteousness, it's the same as Saint Urbain's, the same as Sage Frakes, the same as Patch's, the same as Alethea's. Upon reaching Estrella, she will choose to end her own life in a dramatic moment that caps off one of the most interesting and unique boss encounters you can have in a video game. When people become obsessed with these games, like I have, this is why. Say hello to the new top spot, Maiden Estrella. Equipped with Demon Brant, we take our final trip to Boletaria to take on the final boss of the game. After an overly long elevator, we approach Old King Allant, or False King Allant. Sorry, I know this is supposed to be a dramatic part of the video, but I was just standing there buffing my character and getting my inventory right, and I took so long that the elevator closed on me. So now I have to go all the way back down and then all the way back up, which is a good 2 minutes of waiting time. Okay, let's do this. Upon first fighting him, he's this big evil king atop the mountain that is this game. He might be the most stereotypically evil looking dude in this whole game. He fights like it too, using powerful winged attacks that soar through the stage at you with gap closing ability that we haven't really seen up until this point. I imagine that if Demon Souls is your first Souls game, this guy is practically an unkillable anime god. He is a quote-unquote straightforward boss like we've talked about, but he balances close-range, hard-hitting attacks with ranged attacks and gap closers, as well as an infamously devastating and devious grab attack that literally reduces your character's soul level, like your total level. It's nuts. Fighting him, though, is a delight, if you ask me. I see him as a bit easy nowadays, but nothing can beat the first impression and the experience of learning his moveset. I'm so impressed by the detail in his animations and how telegraphed his attacks are. They're not too easy to avoid, but you start to gather a rhythm and know what you can and can't do. Here's that attack, by the way. I definitely purposefully got hit by that so I could showcase it in the video. That was something I was doing there. But yeah, his animations, right? And like you can find new and sort of clever ways to punish his attacks the more you see them. But unfortunately, he does suffer a bit from some robotic AI, most notably with his like AoE attack. Sometimes it does take me out of the climactic immersion that this fight definitely has in its best moments. I appreciate how the fight doesn't try to do more than it should and keeps the area simple and clean. kind of like the way you're making me feel tonight. Can you tell I'm near the end of the video yet? I could come, analytics say like 15% of people are still here. So shout out to you if you're still watching this. All right. I can comfortably say that this is the most interesting and complex mechanical boss fight in the game. And the presentation, while not the best in the game, is just good enough to give this moment the epic finale it deserves. I love his design, and I totally think that the game earns this moment of like extravagant video gaminess. It completely works for me as tonal whiplash with the rest of the game. And of course, it makes it doubly interesting when you have it confirmed to you that this is, once again, a deception. The final moment of misguiding the player. You just killed the demonic manifestation of the king, not the king himself. The real horror, the real evil, still lies below.
How did you defeat my demonic reflection? How many souls might you have devoured, I wonder? The rest is up to the Old One. If it is to be, then you shall be beckoned.
Returning to the Nexus, the floor beneath you that you have come to be so accustomed to literally shatters beneath your feet. Metaphorically, literally, spiritually. The revelation of this world is upon you, and the Maiden in Black invites you down to confront your future.
Old One, I have granted thy wish. A new demon. Come now, be good.
From the False King to your encounter with the Old One, this is truly one of the best stretches of video game I've ever played. I adore the art and imaginative design on display here, and I think it still holds up as an everlasting image in my head of staggering eldritch horror. The Old Ones, especially in the remake, by the way, it's just incredible. I don't want to mince words. I consume a lot of media. The artistic skill on display here is some of the best I've gotten to see. I love these games so much. Entering the maw of the unknown confronts you with the real final boss of this game, the true King Allant. A just bulbous pus of man writhing on the floor, his entire humanity and existence given to the demons, forfeited to the demons in search of power. It's a just straightforward moral lesson that the game is teaching at this point about a relationship to power and what it can do as a corrupting force. It is another moment in which I think these games latched on to people in such a meaningful way that this was the final boss. The game has no insistence on leaving you with an epic moment that, makes you want to purchase a new one or play it again right away. Instead, it chooses to give you a punching bag and a lesson.
Slayer of demons, go back above. The Nexus shall imprison thee no longer. I shall lull the old one back to slumber.
If you've been paying attention to this game, as soon as this doesn't end with a cutscene and you regain control of your player, you should know that you've been confronted with a choice. Of course, this game is too clever and too well designed to present that choice to you. But again, the choice exists. Walk away, be free from the Nexus, and let the old one sleep, or succeed King Allant and gain that power for yourself by slaying the Maiden in Black. Alethea has experienced a lot. More importantly, though, she's learned a lot. And in a beautiful moment, looking back over her shoulder, she's learned enough from the NPCs, from people like Stockpile Thomas, to walk away from this and be content with the knowledge and power that she has been given.
The Old One, along with the Maiden, was swept back into the lulling fog. Boletaria was spared from the demons, but also lost its knowledge of the soul arts. The souls lost during the pandemonium were never retrieved. And today, the unstable world has another monumental to hold its fabric together. A brave new hero of unprecedented power.
I want to thank each and every one of you for watching this video. I haven't uploaded a video in 4 years. I'm confronted with some very complex feelings right now, kind of wrapping up this video. I have so much editing to do and I have to watch the whole thing, but if you'll excuse me for a second, all I really want to say in my sort of post-video rant is just Alethea learns a lot about how to let certain things go and how to keep certain things alive and how to be content with things. I am so moved by the stories of these games, both the fiction but also the stories that you develop as you play them, because they're so relatable and you can just transpose them onto your own life. I have a lot of anxiety about uploading this But I really hope that a lesson can be learned from it, that you have to be able to let yourself do things. You have to be able to go on the journey and proceed. Who knows if I ever make a video again, but I'm really proud of myself for making this one, and I hope that you all can find your thing. Anyway, have a good night, everyone. I appreciate you watching. Maybe I'll see you in the next one.